Hello, everybody, and welcome to what is a very sad day for me. Today we're going to be reacting to episode 9 of season 1 of Arcane, and this will be my final reaction for the series, at least for season 1. There is season 2 that has been announced, so it's not like it's going away forever. It's just going on a vacation for at least 2022. I can't imagine that this will be released anytime in the next year, given how long the first one took. So 2023 at the earliest. Honestly, I kind of expect a bit later, given how long the first one took. But who knows? If it takes long for them to make a second season that's up to the quality of this in terms of writing and presentation, then I'm willing to wait. I'm not going anywhere. More of this, no matter how long I have to wait, I'd be definitely up for it. But for right now, this is my final one. And so it's a little bit bittersweet for me. As of right now, I think the first 2 episodes have gone live, and the third has gone live on Patreon. Either way, there's been an outpouring of support and interest in this. It's gotten much more interaction than I thought it would, and lots of people are enjoying it. So thank you very much for the support. Up until now, thanks very much for any Patreon support. I hope you've enjoyed the early access, the full length for the second half of the series, and all of that. I hope you've enjoyed the discussions in general. So thank you again. You guys have made this a lot more enjoyable than I thought it would be. This has been so much fun. This is the most fun I've had making content in a long time. And it's been very rewarding. It's definitely enhanced my appreciation for Arcane, I think, just being able to watch, react, discuss, interact with you guys, all of that sort of thing. But just a couple of housekeeping things before I get into the reaction for this one. Firstly, some have been asking me about if I'd react to Season 2 whenever it comes out. For sure, unless something incredibly weird happens or something out of the blue, I definitely am going to be reacting to it. Doing these reactions and discussions are part of the Arcane experience for me. I can't really separate them in my mind. So for sure, the first time I watch every episode, I will be doing reactions and discussions for season 2. I'd love to, and I can't imagine not doing it. Now, others have asked about the potential for reactions on other shows. Like I said in the first video, I only ever intended to cover Arcane in reactions and potential future seasons. That was all I really planned to do. But like I said, this has been so much fun. I'd love to do it for other series, but the thing is, I'm just picky about the sort of series I'd do for this. There has to be lots of meat in the character work, in the story, lots of good presentation, whether that be through visuals or writing or subtext, that sort of thing. Stuff to talk about, stuff to discuss, and it has to be, enjoyable for me. If I'm not enjoying the show, then it's not going to make for a great reaction. I never like watching people react to things that they're not enjoying. It's just not a fun experience to me. Maybe some of you can relate, not sure. There are things coming out in the near future that I would love to react to, the prime of them being Attack on Titan's final season, the final part of the final season. The only thing about that is that I'm a manga reader. I know what is coming up, so I'm not going to be blind reacting to this. And I know that the majority of the draw to reactions is to blind reactions. I get that. Vicariously experiencing it through the eyes of someone who doesn't know what's going to happen for the first time. So I totally get that, and that's why I think that there might not be much of an audience for a manga reader's reactions to Attack on Titan. I'm not sure, but I think it would be a lot of fun to try out. I'm about 50-50. By the time this video comes out for episode 9, the final season of Attack on Titan will have already started airing. So I would have either made the decision to, or to not, record my reactions. We'll see by then. And then, if that's the case, I'll upload it and see if people are interested. Or not. It depends on if I decided to follow through with that. Attack on Titan aside, though, I would be open to reacting to other series. It wouldn't be more than one at a time, though. I've got a lot of stuff going on in my life. I wouldn't be able to do more than that. But if you have a series you'd like me to react to, for sure, I would welcome all recommendations or suggestions for a reaction series. Just as long as you know that there is no guarantee I'm going to pick it, and that the majority of ones given to me I'm not going to pick for a variety of reasons. I have to be personally interested in it. I have to have not seen it already. Even the Attack on Titan ones, they're new adaptations coming out. I've never seen these episodes before, which is why it would be, half blind, or however you'd classify that. But if I've seen the show already, I don't really see much of a point to reacting to it, obviously. So the end point is I'm going to be very picky. If you're all right with that, then go for it. If you're open to the possibility of me not doing what you suggest, go for it. Hopefully you guys understand where I'm coming from. I was kind of spoiled with my first reaction series being Arcane, so I guess I'm a bit picky because of that. One more thing is that this episode, I'm sure you can tell by the video length already, is going to be the longest in the series for sure. not only just because I'm going to discuss what is going to surely be a substantial episode, but also because I want to sum up my thoughts on the series towards the end in the discussion. I want to talk about the characters, what I thought about each of them. I want to do a short review of the series, maybe sum things up in a character tier list sort of thing. I just really want to put my all into this last one because this is my last chance, right? This is all I've got. If you just want to watch the reaction and that's it, then that's totally fine. But I'm in here for the long haul, so hopefully some of you are interested in all of that. I think that's all I wanted to say with the housekeeping. One last thing I want to do is with regards to episode titles. So I've talked about a couple of the episode titles, maybe 2 or 3 throughout my reactions, but I just want to go through each one and sort of look at the meanings of what those episode titles could refer to. I know at least a couple of them have dual meanings or are really substantial, or talk about certain things that happen in the episodes in an interesting way. So I just want to go through all of them to do it properly. So episode 1 is entitled Welcome to the Playground. I think that's pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. The playground directly, I think specifically, refers to the Undercity. We have the song Welcome to the Playground playing as Vi, Powder, Milo, and Clagger descend for the first time, and we see it. So I think it's directly referring to the Undercity being this playground of, of misfits and good people too, a mix of all sorts of people. And that sort of thing is fun. Like, it's a playground. It's interesting to get to know these sorts of people and this sort of city. But I also think on a general level, it refers to the whole series. Welcome to this playground of a series. There's lots of fun to be had. There's lots of sadness and tragedy as well. But it's going to be a fun time, so welcome in. So I think that's what episode 1's referring to. Episode 2 is entitled Some Mysteries Are Better Left Unsolved. I think that's, again, pretty self-explanatory, directly referring to the conflict between Heimerdinger and Jayce, that dual-sided nature of discovery that I talked about in episode 2 and have been talking about since. We're introduced to Jayce and how he looks at magic as this wondrous thing and how he wants to share it with the world and how wonderful all that is, how great of an ambition it is, how, admirable it is. But we're also told about the dangers of that if taken to the farthest extreme and if put in the wrong hands. And I think that's what Some Mysteries Are Better Left Unsolved is referring to. There are some things you don't want to delve too deep into because of the double-edged nature of that, because of how volatile they can be. So I think that is directly referring to that concept. Episode 3 is entitled The Base Violence Necessary for Change. I already discussed this in my episode 3 reaction for a few minutes and talked about that, how it can refer to Violet's journey, Powder's journey, the way that Silco approaches his quest for respect and opportunity for him and his people, and a sort of abstract flip side to it can be applied to the way that Jayce and Viktor discover these new things and how they can be applied to society. Will these drastic changes lead to a base violence or an eruption or something like that? So I already discussed it, won't really dive into it now. Episode 4 is entitled Happy Progress Day, obviously alluding to Progress Day in Piltover, which is a great way to sort of illustrate all the changes that have occurred in Piltover society, with Jayce, with Viktor, how Heimerdinger is doing, what Medarda is up to, all of that. So directly alludes to that. But also I think Happy Progress Day shows us, it's a post-time skip episode, so I think it also shows us how our other characters have progressed, what states they're in, which ways they progressed, which ways plot lines have progressed, and all of this sort of thing. So I think it's a clever title for a post-time skip episode. There's plot and setting relevance with regards to the day it occurs, and also it relates to the characters and the state that the story's in. Episode 5 is entitled Everybody Wants to Be My Enemy. I said during my reaction to that it's a direct allusion to the OP, the opening song, but I also think that it applies to a couple of the characters. Firstly, I've been told by a few people, so I haven't been able to confirm this for sure, but it seems pretty clear to me because of the amount of people who have told me this, that Everybody Wants to Be My Enemy, the song Enemy, refers more or less directly to Jinx and her psychology and the way that she views, the world. She has reached a point in her life where all these people who she used to know, post-time skip, are against her. She looks at Vi, and obviously Vi reaches out to her throughout the story, post-time skip, and wants to help her, but she sees her with Caitlyn, and she views that as a slight towards her. She sees Ekko. She's been quarreling with Ekko throughout the whole thing, and it's a confirmation at episode 7 that she's been against him, this person who she grew up with. She also has visions of Milo and Clagger, particularly Milo, criticizing her, whispering in her ear these sorts of things, that she's no good, taunting her. So I think it's pretty accurate for Jinx's state of mind. It's a great metaphor for that. It's very sad, too. Everyone wants to be her enemy, except one person. And, as the story progresses, Silco himself also, in her eyes, turns against her because of the way he hides certain things from her about Violet. So eventually that leads us to see that literally everyone in her eyes at some point seems to want to be her enemy. It's very sad for Jinx. That encapsulates the character herself more than specified to episode 5, but as it delves more into her mindset, it applies pretty directly to her. And also I think it applies to Jayce in a lesser way, because this is the episode where he starts being more political, more conniving, thanks to what Medarda teaches him, to what Mel teaches him. He learns that if he keeps going on this path, people will be against the policies he tries to enact. People will become his enemy. And all he's trying to do is do the right thing, but he's a bit naive. And so he sees that if he does this, people are going to become his enemy. And so he's got to adjust and do different things. So I think it also applies to Jayce and his political situation, to a lesser extent. Episode 6 is one of the ones I'm least sure about. It's called When the Walls Come Tumbling Down, or When These Walls Come Tumbling Down. I think that's an allusion to the overall tone of the episode. These walls coming down, it's a very sort of sad prospect. Things are just in a bad state. Things are crumbling down. All of it's sort of turned into ruin. And if you recall, throughout the entirety of episode 6's discussion, I talked about how it was such a lament. The tone of it was so sobering and sad throughout. Everything was so heavy. We have the realizations of Viktor's state, that he's dying. We explore Vi's mindset and how she's almost grieving about how she, in her eyes, betrayed Powder. We have Caitlyn trying and failing to reach out to her in certain ways. We have Jinx learning about Vi, and we see her sad state of mind as she tries to reach out, and how her trauma prevents her from reaching into Powder and totally becoming Powder because of her insecurities and all of that sort of thing, and how she can't fully embrace Vi, how sad that is. We have Jayce's reaction to Viktor's diagnosis, and how Mel very soberly but very compassionately supports him. It's just very sad and sobering the entire way through. So I think When These Walls Come Tumbling Down is indicative of that tone. And the climax of the episode results in, like I said, Jinx not trusting Vi and sort of lashing out, and the Firelights attacking them, and then making off with Caitlyn and Vi, and the sisters being separated again. Silco's whole empire sort of crashing down on him as he loses track of Jinx, and he becomes unraveled because of Vi's escape. All of these sorts of things are tumbling down in many different ways. So I think, well, I'm not sure what directly it alludes to. I think it generally alludes to a lot of things that happen in this episode, tonally and literally. Episode 7 is The Boy Savior. I think that's probably the most one-dimensional episode title in the series. It could be referring to some other boys that could be viewed as saviors in the series, but I think that would be overthinking it a little bit on my end, so I'm not going to delve too much into that. I think it's just about Ekko. Episode 7 is what I consider to be my favorite episode in the series up until this point. It's 10 out of 10. It's a masterpiece of an episode in multiple ways, and not just because of the hugely raw fight between Ekko and Jinx, one of my favorite scenes in anything ever. Episode 7's amazing, and Ekko and everything we get to learn about him, subtextually, if it's served right in front of our eyes, everything associated with Ekko is wonderful. It catapults him up the list of my favorite characters. I talked about Ekko for ages in my episode 7 discussion because of how much substance there is subtextually and literally. And I just think The Boy Savior, it's just saying, Ekko, this is where he's at, the leader of the Firelights. This is his episode. And a hell of an episode it was. And lastly, episode 8 is entitled Oil and Water. The episode title is literally said by Vi when she's talking about her and Caitlyn and how, they just aren't compatible with one another. They come from two different worlds. Oil and Water referring to how those two characters come from such different worlds, and how, as a result, they'll never be able to sort of mesh well with each other. That's what Vi says. And like I said in the discussion, I think a lot of that is her trying to convince herself of that to alleviate some of the pain that she might experience if things go wrong down the line, because I don't think she believes that at all. But that directly refers to their relationship. Also, on a broader scale, I think it refers to Piltover and Zaun, how these two societies are oil and water. It's so hard for them to find an amicable solution for a variety of ways. The two societies are oil and water, and a lot of things in this episode sort of illustrate that. So yeah, that's an overview of the 8 episode titles. This was just a sort of casual overview of them. It wasn't meant to be all-encompassing. I'm sure I missed some things. But yeah, just thought I'd go over it to do it properly. And with all that said, we get to the last episode, episode 9, entitled The Monster You Created. Jinx seems to be the best metaphor for a monster, the best representation of a monster. You created. That could refer to Vi, because of what she did at the end of episode 3. It could also refer to Silco and the effect he had on Jinx's life, because he clearly made her go in that way, in that trajectory. So I think the monster you created would refer directly to Jinx if I had to guess. And you created, the you in that sentence, could either be referring to Vi or Silco, or both of them. Who knows? I also think there's a possibility that the monster you created could refer to Jayce. If his arc goes in the direction of corruption, after all that he's done, the direction he's been going in all this time, and after what he's done to the industrial factory that's producing Shimmer after killing that kid, if it continues to go in that darker direction, yeah, he could very much become a monster. And the you in that sentence, the monster you created, could refer to Medarda. Because in those episodes, there's a bit of a hint of her looking at Jayce and there being a bit of a, what could I be creating by doing this, by teaching him these things, by nudging him in this direction? So I think it could potentially refer to Jayce too. I hope it doesn't, because like I said in episode 8, for selfish reasons, I want him to remain Jayce Tallis, the Jayce we knew in the beginning. But we'll see. Anyways, this was a hell of an intro, a hell of a preamble. Sorry it went on this long. Let's get into episode 9. I'm super excited. Don't know if I'm in for hype, fireworks, tragedy, a sort of quieter episode, not sure. But we'll see. I'm not ready. So we're starting with this. So how is he going to react to what he did? And how's she going to react?
You didn't have a choice. He knew what he was signing up for.
We're done here.
We haven't even scratched the surface. Silco's still out there.
Do you not understand? I am part of this now. The next parents who get a message their kid isn't coming home, I don't even know where to take it.
You've always been a part of this. You just never had to look it in the eye. One dead kid?
Wow.
There's hundreds more where he came from, thanks to Silco and thanks to people like you who stuck their heads in the dirt.
I'm already emotional. 30 seconds
Not
in.
for me.
Take those off.
Make me.
Wow. Yeah, clear opposition. Wow. I love how both of them reacted to that in terms of the storytelling.
You won't make it alone.
It felt like a short-lived partnership. It felt like one that wouldn't last long. So Jayce reverts back to Jayce. He's been doing this the whole series. He's never lost sight of himself. And again, here, when he's taken it the furthest he can, when he's reached the potential point of no return, right before he passes it, he comes back. It got me very emotional to see him realize that, because he's done something unforgivable here, but he's realized his mistake, and he's realized that he's gone too far, and I'm really, really happy that he's realized this. And Vi, I think you can understand why she thinks that way as well. She knew what all this was doing.
Say what you want about the late sheriff. He had his uses.
Too bad Jinx didn't think so.
Rest in peace.
You didn't do anything about that piece of shit that murdered my boy. Let me guess. Jinx will take care of it.
Oh
Just like
boy.
she's taking care of everything else.
Oh boy.
instead of some petty personal dispute, as so often occurs here.
Where is Jinx anyhow?
Oh boy. They've been plotting against him already. Well, those two have. We don't know about Sevika. This is just gonna make it worse. Yeah. He's telling her, you gonna do something about this? Look at how far it's gotten. Oh. This guy, he suffered so much. And now his mistake.
Viktor, watching how you work so tirelessly to make the world a better place, I couldn't forgive myself if I didn't try. Everyone's got to do their part, right?
It's his life's work. He's fully against it, but it's... Oh. I get the feeling like it's got a life of its own. Viktor's fully against it now, it seems like, because of what it's caused, but he can't bring himself to destroy the labor of his life.
Mel, would you like...
Because of how she's influenced Jayce. She's mad at him. Mad at her.
Stay away from Jayce.
You really are fond of him.
Better yet, march back to your ship and get the hell out of my city.
Get hold of yourself. I taught you better. You're in trouble, Mel. The man who killed your brother doesn't believe the score is settled. And his resources exceed ours. If there is a chance Hextech can be weaponized, we must have it.
I see.
Piltover isn't your testing ground. I can't believe you'd start a war just to cover your ass.
I would set the world ablaze to protect our family.
I stopped being part of this family the moment you cast me out.
She still loves her, though, like she said.
Why did you do it?
Because you weakened me. I couldn't endure the look in your eyes whenever I made the decisions, the necessary decisions to keep us safe.
Wow, she softened her, and she couldn't bear her judgment.
Let the war unfold. Then you come home, take your place at my side. It's where you belong.
Who is Mel Medarda now? She's got a choice to make. I think I know which way she'll go in, but it's a hell of a hard choice because, like she said, she still loves her family.
I'm sorry.
Oh, he's using his cane again. His leg not working after that sort of shock.
Am I interrupting?
Direct parallel. Comes full circle. Jayce saves him this time. Oh my gosh, I love these two.
I thought a loose cog was gonna take someone's eye out.
At least you didn't throw up.
Everything made sense then.
You have to destroy it. The hex core. I can't do it. You have to. Please.
Oh my god. It takes so much strength
Your disease without the hex core.
for both of them to make this decision.
Me. Okay. Okay. I promise. We lost ourselves. Lost our dream.
In the pursuit of great, we failed to do good.
We have to make it right.
Holy shit. I love those two so much. Is it happening?
When you took Vander out of play, I thought now here's the man who understands what it takes to run an enterprise. The attitude, the instinct, the eye. But time's lapped you, old man.
You with him, are you?
Heimerdinger parallels?
Screwed up, Silco.
You're too young to remember what the Undercity was before it became an enterprise.
Big Heimerdinger
Nothing.
parallels.
Loyalty. Brothers and sisters back to back against whatever the world threw at us.
He's talking to Sevika.
Now I'm...
Today's the day you die, Silco.
That's a risk I've known all my life. But I still believe
No.
in loyalty.
There's no way he was gonna die like that. No chance. But he was still nervous about it. He believes in
I would have
loyalty.
had your son killed for this.
Oh.
Though I suppose we're ahead on that account.
Wow.
Get out. Were you tempted?
Not for a worm like him. But he won't be the last.
Wow. Sevika's a good character. I find it interesting how I've never once felt antagonism towards her, like true antagonism towards her, despite her tea. I'll get back to that after. Oh, Talus? Wow. Oh man. The respective kings of the top and bottom. Oh.
Perfect place for an ambush.
I was reminded recently of what brought us together in the first place. Progress.
Far be it from me to stand in the way.
Free trade routes. Blanket amnesty.
Demands.
Unrestricted access to the Hexgate sovereignty. You really think you're in a position to demand all this?
But the big display followed by a request for parley.
Oh.
You're tipping your hand.
Yeah. He's in over his head. Yeah.
I am afraid. Today I got a glimpse of what war between us might look like. Your people wouldn't stand a chance. I'm trying to save you from annihilation.
He's not lying. Not at all.
You want peace. This is the price.
You'll discontinue the production of Shimmer.
Half there already.
And I need Jinx. She has to pay for what she's done.
Ooh.
They weren't her crimes. She was working for me.
Look at the way his face shifts right away.
Get me Jinx, and I'll give you your nation.
Oh, that's the sticking point. He's not going to do that. The way his facial expression shifted from composed to completely panicking as soon as he said Jinx, that was amazing presentation. He's not going to do it. There's no way. This dream, his entire life's dream, and Jinx, though, he loses complete composure with Jinx. Oh.
How were you able to accomplish so much so quickly?
Progress.
You'd be surprised what you can pull off when your life depends on it.
Heimerdinger's gonna learn a little bit.
It's not enough to give people what they need to survive. You have to give them what they need to live.
That's the whole thing I've been talking about since episode 1, about life in the Undercity. Existence versus actual life.
1,000 times I've imagined this moment. Never like this. All we ever wanted. The boy didn't even haggle. And what do I lose but problems?
That's what Ekko said in episode 1.
Oh,
about Jayce. Oh my gosh. I think it said Ekko there too.
Is there anything so undoing as a daughter?
The parallels. Oh. The parallels between Vander and Silco. Now that he's reached this point, you know, he's realizing a lot of the problems that Vander had. Sevika's been understandable every step of the way, I think, which is what helps her to not be a vehement antagonist to me. I've never really looked at her in that way. Oh. Like a classic Western.
Everyone, out.
Hextech versus Shimmer? From two of the most prominent women in the underground. Ooh. What is this tone shift? Vi is just on a rampage. This is fun. No one's gonna die here. This is just like a fun little melee. Ooh. Okay, maybe it's quickly become not so fun. I may have been wrong.
Well, your guard needs work. I wish I could say it gets easier, kiddo. But I'd be lying. She still needs you. They all do. So what do you say?
You can understand why Vi's doing this, but she's just on this rampage. Yeah. More than anything, she is Vander's successor. She always has been. But Vi is Vander's successor from an earlier... she's his successor, but she reflects him from an earlier point in his life, before he, I think, realized that he had to change. But how can you expect her to do any different, right?
Silco.
After what she's experienced. So much rage, so much loss. Oh,
Bravo,
shit. Oh, God. So she's got multiple captives.
I'm not fit to govern the people who live there. And neither are you. Our opportunity to demonstrate our compassion is past. They're right not to trust us.
You're walking a fine line, Jayce.
This is everything I wanted for his
With respect,
character.
I don't give a shit what any of you think of me anymore.
Yeah, I love it. I love it so much.
Except you. My days here are numbered, but I've come with Viktor, my partner, and a Zonite, with one final proposal.
Jayce has brokered a peace with Silk in exchange for the Undercity's independence.
Silco's not going to agree, though. But yeah, of course there's this outrage at this. They expected this. Family ring?
Really thought I buried this place.
Powder? Are we alone?
For now. Maybe forever. Silco thinks he made Jinx. But he didn't make Jinx. You did.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Powder. I never meant to leave you.
You never left. I always heard you. Your voice. Pushing me. You're the reason I'm still alive.
The only thing that kept me going was the thought of getting back to you.
Are we still sisters?
That's so sad.
Nothing is ever going to change that. What's going on?
Oh. Oh.
He took everything
The
from
bunny
us.
Milo Clagger?
Right here, he stabbed Vander in the back. Just like he planned to with me.
Jinx?
All the time saying you abandoned me when he knew the truth. Liar.
Oh.
We're missing someone.
I think she's getting a bit of the wrong idea about Silco. I don't think she understands how deeply he actually loves her. Oh, God.
I paid your girlfriend a visit this morning.
No!
Sheesh. I'm not that crazy.
Powder! Leave her out of this!
Her or me? She gonna make her make a choice?
Where should I sit? That's
Oh.
your choice, really.
Oh my God.
Make her go away. Please. And you can have Powder back.
Can she, though?
I can't.
Can Powder just come back like that?
Powder, listen. We can
In
just
totality?
go.
What do you have to say about that?
Her name is Jinx. She's lying. You'll be with her a day before she realizes you aren't that girl anymore and turns her back on you.
The first...
You wouldn't lie to me.
Oh my God.
I'm not lying.
Self-affirmation.
We're
Again.
talking.
The Topsiders offered me everything, all in return for you. They can all burn. Everyone betrays us, Jinx. Vander. Her.
Oh.
They will never understand. It's only us.
Oh my God.
You're my daughter. I'll never forsake you.
He's never been more truthful in his life.
Drop the gun!
He'd give up everything for her. Unbelievable.
Wait! She's my sister.
Vi, she's too far gone.
All the music. No.
Look out!
You see, now finish it.
Damn it, Powder! Wake up!
Two sides of Powder. Or Jinx. I think there's only one way this can go.
Don't listen to her!
Oh, no way.
No, I'm sorry.
I never would have given you to them.
Never.
Don't cry. You're perfect.
Oh my god. This guy's been a... Oh. Oh, I think that made the decision for her. I think that his death
It's okay.
forced her to realize what she is, what she believes she is. Yeah.
I thought maybe you could love me like you used to, even though I'm different. But you changed too. Here's to the new us.
I am the monster you created.
Chills.
My parts. Worst of all,
She's using it.
me to live, and I needed you more. I hope you know we had everything, and you broke me and left these.
Oh, no way. Just as they're...
Show them. We will show them all.
Oh, holy shit. This is incredible. Oh, she takes off the ring. That's her choice.
I support Councillor Talus's proposal for peace.
Chair's gonna be empty forever. Just as they're deciding for peace. It's gonna be snuffed out just as they do it. Just paint it over.
What could have been?
Definitely the most emotional I've been watching this show. That smile from Jayce to Mel. Sorry. That whole thing. That was hitting me consistently throughout. Okay, I think I'm going to need to collect my thoughts a little bit. And once I do, maybe take some notes, and then I'll be back with the discussion. So yeah, that was Arcane Season 1, Episode 9. To no one's surprise, I've had to take a bit of a break in between them. I mentioned that I might have to do that to sort of collect my thoughts. It was definitely necessary. It's been a couple of days since I watched it, just because I want to get everything, all my thoughts together and address everything with the amount of respect and due diligence and thoroughness. I'm not sure if that's a word, but thoroughness that I think every aspect, every plot element, every character of this series deserves, especially in this fantastic last episode. This was an amazing episode. It was emotional and heavy from start to finish, and I kind of questioned beforehand, is this going to be a bunch of fireworks? Is this going to be really hype? Is this going to be tragic, sobering? And it's more or less, apart from the huge fight between Vi and Sevika in the middle of it, it was more or less very much in keeping with the tone of Episode 6. Very sobering, very heavy, carrying forward all of these character journeys and plot threads and themes to their natural conclusion, with immense weight, immense profundity, and immense respect for every character involved. So with regards to that, it was like the tone of Episode 6, but on steroids. Everything that happened was just amplified to the nth degree in terms of emotion and drama and just weight. This episode got me more emotional by far than any other episode in the series. In the first 30 seconds, I was emotional just looking at Jayce and the way he looked at what he had done at the kid. And that carried through the whole time. I was a mess throughout. I apologize if I was a bit overly emotional. It just kind of struck me naturally out of nowhere. But that's what this story has done to me. And so it starts there at the beginning, first 30 seconds, right to the last scene. That whole thing carries through. The emotion carries through all the way. A beautiful bookend with Jayce at the beginning with a hugely emotional scene, Jayce at the end with a hugely emotional scene. That ending shot, not the exact ending shot, not the final shot of the whole series, but very close to it, of him smiling at Mel, believing that they'd done it, that they'd gotten through to the council, that they've broken down these barriers to lead to true equality between Zaun and Piltover. That is such a pure smile. That is such a smile of joy, and we've done it. We've done the right thing. There's an innocent wonder and a beautiful childish joy to that smile that harkens back to what Jayce was like in episode 2. The first thing we get to know about him is his childish wonder, fixation on the wonders of magic. That comes back for Jayce in a journey where he's strayed and drifted and ebbed and flowed and gone dark and come back. At the end, we sort of end where we begin with him, with that childish wonder, except this time, it's not about the wonders of magic and how it saved his life and how he wants to share it with the world. It's about how beautifully he sees the concept of equality between these two sides of Piltover. And what a shift in motive, despite the complexion of his attitude towards that motive and goal being the same. It's a beautiful character journey. Sorry, that's just a tease about what I want to say about Jayce. I've gone on a bit of a tangent, but what I want to say is that it's a beautiful bookend from the beginning to the end of the episode, and a beautiful callback to what he was like all that time ago in episode 2. But that shot of him smiling, it might be the most haunting shot in the series, because just as it was in the beginning, it is the same now. Except now there's a very dark tinge to it, given what happened right after he smiled. And yet, it's the same sort of message, isn't it? That childish wonder that is such an everlasting element to his character throughout this whole show. He's had to learn the same thing both times, at the beginning and at the end. In the beginning, he learned that he can't just have this narrow focus on this dream. He can't expect this pure dream to be able to be brought about without having to sacrifice things, without having to navigate all sorts of obstacles. Same thing here. He had struggled and pained with him and Viktor and Mel to come about with this end result. And finally, he believes he's done it, and we see that wonder shine through. But this dream of equality, it's not so simple. And I don't mean to downplay the amount of pain he's had to go through to get to this end result, but it's not so simple, and that shot from Jinx, that is a reality check. In this show, in this story, in Arcane, those things you wish for, those pure dreams, more likely than not, they're not able to come true without huge caveats. And so I just think of all the emotions associated with that smile, that look, the joy, the inspiration, the just pure adrenaline rush of being able to transcend these societal hierarchies for the first real time. He's been navigating them this whole time and playing within those boundaries, and here he transcended them. And so there's so much joy and emotion because of what this means, and it's just snuffed out. So, yeah, sorry again for talking so much about that. I'll come back to Jayce. I'll come back to that moment. But it was just an amazing way to end the episode, and because of that, one of the most haunting shots in the entire series. And it's interesting that I went on that tangent about Jayce just now, because I think it's a bit misrepresentative to portray him as the primary player of this episode. Because he isn't. He was one of them for sure. He was absolutely pivotal, and you all know how absolutely willing I am to give Jayce all the credit in the world and all the importance in the world. But I don't want to make things misrepresentative. This episode, to me, was all about Silco and Jinx. More than anything, Silco leaves the most lasting impression for me. For example, I'd say episode 2 was Jayce's episode. I'd say episode 6 was Viktor's episode. I'd say episode 7 was Ekko's episode. You know, that sort of thing. This was Silco's episode, in my opinion. Not to say lots of other characters didn't get their moments, because they absolutely did. There was tons of importance on every character, every major character. But to me, when I think of episode 9, I think of Silco. And Jinx is right there with him. So, messy preamble aside, let me just kind of start and sum this episode up. To me, episode 9 was an episode about choices and the ramifications of those choices. Every major character in this episode made a choice. I think the only major one who didn't make a choice was Caitlyn, and she was held captive most of the episode. But yeah, every single character made a major choice. Every single major one. We have Jayce, we have Vi, we have Silco, we have Jinx, we have Mel Medarda, we have Viktor, we have Sevika as well. I'd say that Heimerdinger and Ekko are the only major characters of note aside from Caitlyn who didn't make a choice, but that's because they were hardly in this episode. So yeah, but them aside, those two who weren't really a huge part of it, they just had a scene, and Caitlyn, who was more of a part of it, but sort of bucked that trend. Aside from them, everyone else made a major choice that defined their character in one way or another and gave us a snapshot of who they are, where they are at this point in their progression and journey, and then through examining them through this lens and looking at it holistically, we see where the story's at. And we see the ramifications that come about as a result of those choices and the plot events that then spring from them. And something I also want to stress is that all of these choices were hugely difficult. They were not no-brainers. They were all weighty and important. And while maybe not every single character in the process of making that choice felt difficulty in choosing at that point, the journey to getting there was very painstaking in one way or another. In some way, it was hugely pivotal and hugely difficult. So we'll get into the ramifications and the specific choices I'm talking about a bit later on, but I'm sure you know what I'm getting at just through introducing that concept. So where to start? There is so much to talk about in this episode, so much to grasp onto, but I think the best point would be the more minor stuff to start off, before delving into each of the character threads and each of the plot threads. So I think a good place to start would be through a couple of minor characters. The first one would be Sevika. I don't mean to say that she's inconsequential, because she's absolutely consequential, but she's not as important as Silco, Jinx, Jayce, Viktor, Vi, all those characters. She's not as important as them, and I don't have quite as much to say about her, so I think it's a good place to start. So I haven't talked as much about Sevika as many of the other characters, even the very minor ones. I've given Marcus a lot of time in the limelight. I've given characters like Grayson time in the limelight, despite being quite minor. Sevika's another minor character, but she's very much a moving, organic piece in this setting, in this story, in this world. And she's kind of snuck up on me towards the end as being a good character, someone who I like, someone who I find understandable, whose perspective is very interesting, and who contributes. So there are two aspects to Sevika that I find very enticing. The first is understandability, and the second is loyalty. Now I'll start with the second because there seems to be an immediate retort or contradiction to what I'm saying about loyalty. In episode 2, she literally went against Vander despite being with him in the first place. And that's true. She went against someone who she'd been with, who she'd been aligned with for so long, and went to Silco, his literal complete enemy, the opposite faction. But despite that, there has been nothing throughout the series to counteract the idea that Sevika is deeply loyal. She is so loyal to the people that she's aligned with, to the people that she respects, to the side that she's on. She doesn't screw around. She's not flimsy with her loyalty. And I think that's been illustrated throughout. In the beginning, she defects, she leaves Vander, she joins Silco. And I'll get into her joining Silco in a bit. But one of the most defining moments of her character is in episode 3, when she defends him, she shields him with her body. The explosion that Jinx caused, the explosion that Powder caused at the end of episode 3, her new leader, this man who she just joined, she dives in front of him to save him from mortal peril. She loses her arm in the process. That is immense loyalty to someone she just joined. So I think that says a lot about Silco's ability to gain respect, his ability to sell himself and his cause to these people. But it also speaks of Sevika and her loyalty and the type of person she is. She adhered herself to him so quickly and so fiercely. She was willing to give up her life for him right in the beginning. And that is indicative of the person she became. Now, throughout the series, she has problems with Jinx. She doesn't think that Jinx is in the best interests of her side, of her faction, of her team, of Silco, and his overall goal. And that's understandable because In the end, she ended up being absolutely correct about that. Because what happened in the end? Silco was about to give up the whole dream, the whole cause for Jinx. So she was right. She absolutely had every right to be concerned about that and to question that, because it wasn't in her best interest. It wasn't in the best interest of the overall cause. And then, so even as these things elevate, even as she's literally taken captive, tied up, left tied up by the ceiling, by her limbs, by Jinx, by Silco's daughter of sorts, even as she's being laid out to dry, the second in command of Silco being ignored and being treated as a foot soldier, and to be honest, Silco treats her as less significant as she deserves to be treated throughout Act 2 and maybe the beginning of Act 3, but definitely Act 2, where he dismisses her concerns, her very valid concerns, in favor of Jinx and sort of brushes her off. And yet, despite all that, Sevika continues to be loyal. She continues to have Silco's best interests in heart, to respect him, to respect his choices. She might not agree, but she grudgingly accepts them. And so this continues through the post-time skip portion of Arcane, as Silco continues to spiral, continues to place more importance on Jinx, continues to be more and more insecure of her abandoning him, of Vi's presence, of all of that, and just almost parasitically attaching himself to her and caring for her, and placing his everything on Jinx. And yet through all of that, she remains loyal. Finn and everyone else on the Zon Council come to her with a proposition to kill Silco. And while their interests very much align, logically it's an understandable thing for them to do, some would say a smart thing for them to do. She doesn't have respect for this. She doesn't have respect for going behind their backs and doing this cowardly assassination attempt on the man who has gotten them this far. She has so much respect for Silco. Even though she might disagree with him on some things, she was absolutely never going to betray him. I questioned it in episode 8. I said I'm not quite sure if that's going to pan out that way. Turns out she was never going to do it. Like she said, her words, she would never do that for a sniveling worm like Finn. And despite disagreeing, despite not quite being given the acknowledgement she deserves, I think, by Silco, she nonetheless stands by his side. She respects him so much as a leader, as a person, as the proper man to lead the Undercity. And that fake out, that moment where, you don't know if she's going to do it or not, well, you kind of know. I think it's made pretty obvious that she wasn't going to do it. And what I really loved about that is that despite Silco kind of talking indirectly to her through what he was saying and seeming confident, he was nevertheless extremely shaken up by the experience and panting and distraught and nervous and anxious, because the possibility of her betraying him was so scary to him, and he didn't know 100%, and he was scared, but she was never going to do it. And what I love about that is she makes a declaration of loyalty after that. This will not be the last attempt. We have to, be a bit smarter about this. We need to shore up our defenses, because things like this will continue to happen. It's a statement of solidarity, of togetherness, of I'm with you and I will never leave you. And that is touching in a way. She is unflinching in this loyalty. And so I really wonder, with Silco gone, if she'll be thrust a bit more into the limelight. I would like that. I think Sevika's a good character. But so with regards to her loyalty, she's not blindly loyal. And I like that. She has independence and her own ideals as a person, and she will only be loyal if she views the person she's loyal to be in line with those ideals and to be contributory to the plan for an ideal world that she seeks out. She sees all of those things in Silco, and she respects and admires her leader, so she stays loyal to him. Despite all the things he does with Jinx, she still believes him to be the best man for the job, and that's key. But if he were to suddenly lose himself, and I think if she were to have been given the notion that he would give up this, I think she might have done it. I don't know for sure, but what I get from her character is that if something is against her cause, her idea of the way forward, she will defect, because that is what she did with Vander. That wasn't her being disloyal. That was her seeing what she wants for herself, for her people, and seeing that Vander was not the path to that, so leaving. I think that's very understandable. I've been talking this whole series about how it's understandable for all the people in the Undercity to have different ideals and different views and perspectives of the way forward. There is no single answer. There are multiple answers and multiple perspectives, and none of them are completely right, and very few of them are completely 100% wrong. Sevika is not wrong for not agreeing with Vander. She just had a different view of things, and since he was going diametrically against what she wanted out of this cause, she defected. She joined Silco, who was 100% aligned with her cause. I don't think that's disloyalty. I think that's just going with what you believe to be the best choice for what you believe is right, for the world you want to see, for this path to rising up. Sticking with Vander in that situation would be self-detrimental, altruistic to self-harm. It would be betraying her own dreams because Vander stood in the way of that. His cause was not aligned with what she wanted. So sticking with him, what is the point of doing that? So I think she's deeply loyal, but at the same time, she's her own person. She doesn't put her everything into the people she's loyal to. And I have more respect for her as a person, as a character because of that. I think that adds a nice layer to her, because just being deeply loyal to a person, no matter what they do, even if it goes against what you want, that's not being your own person at all. That's not being independent. That's not having your own views. But Sevika is a strong person in multiple ways. And so she stands up for what is right, and that's why she left Vander. And so this leads into the other aspect of her character that I find so enticing, aside from loyalty, understandability. Sevika is in opposition to characters that are protagonistic for us throughout the entire thing. In the beginning, she opposes Vander. She then opposes Vi. She opposes Jinx, who, despite going dark side, is very much a protagonistic figure because of her backstory, and we see her point of view throughout the whole thing. So she's opposing to Vander, opposing to Vi, opposing to Jinx, all of whom are characters we've come to know and love. Well, maybe love, in the case of Jinx, depending on how you feel about her. She becomes essentially Vi's rival, Vi's adversary, a representation of everything Vi despises, and yet the entire way through, I never felt ill will towards her. I never hated her. I never disliked her, because her perspective is so understandable from the start. This is such a complex world. She's just doing what she thinks is right to navigate through it. She doesn't hold ill will towards people that she opposes. She's just doing what she thinks is right. Now, if someone gets in the way, of course she's going to strike them down. She's going to beat them up. She's going to come into conflict with them. That's what needs to be done. She's a wolf, to use Mrs. Medarda's terminology. But there's not a single point throughout the whole series where I recall thinking Sevika to be anything other than completely understandable. She's just trying to find a place for herself in this world, a place for her people in this world, and she's just doing what she believes will lead to that outcome. And hell if that isn't understandable, right? So despite being antagonistic to quite a few of our characters, I've never felt any reason to hold ill will towards her. And so that's why I think she works very well. This is kind of diving into Vi's character a bit, but I think that's fine. I think this is why she works very well as a representation of why Vi at this point in time is a bit short-sighted, a bit working off her emotions, a bit raw and reckless, and not really thinking things through at this point in time. She's going on this crusade, but she doesn't really have the coherence in her thoughts, and she's just kind of going off emotions. And that's very understandable given the years she spent in prison. But nonetheless, I'm just describing where she's at, because she sees Sevika, this person who defected and represents Silco's cause. And she views her as the person she has to take all of her rage out on, the person she has to kill, I guess. But in all honesty, does she really have hatred towards Sevika? Or does Sevika represent the things that she kinda hates about this world, and just a representation and personification of the sadness and tragedy of her situation? I think she just uses Sevika as a way to take out her rage, rather than really disliking her personally. If you see them fighting each other, obviously they're going all out on each other, they're fighting to kill. But the tone is very much not one of hatred as much as almost a grudging camaraderie, like a grudging respect in their rivalry as they fight each other. That's what I got. You know, there's malice. Vi has malice in her fights with Sevika, particularly at the end of episode 5. But that's just because she has such rage and frustration at the world. Because if she were to really stop and properly think about Sevika, which she is not capable of doing at this point because she's so clouded by emotions, she would realize that Sevika is the least of her problems. All that Sevika really is a valuable member for the opposite cause. And of course that means she would want to take her out, I guess, as a sort of mechanical move, as a cold move to take out the queen to Silco's king, or maybe the most important knight to Silco's king. I think Jinx would be the queen. But aside from that, she doesn't have much reason to hate Sevika. Sevika had understandable reasons for going against Vander. She has her own view on the world and is different from Vi's. And she's just going about it the same way the same way any other character really is. Sevika's not evil, Sevika doesn't have malice, and like I said in episode 5, Sevika is very much in control of herself despite injecting herself with shimmer quite often. I think that's indicative of the type of person she is. Very much in control, very intelligent, very clear-minded, and very loyal. And maybe further along in her development, Vi will realize that Sevika is not the person she should declare as her sworn enemy, at least not as it stands. But at this point, she is not able to do that, for understandable reasons. I'll get into Vi a bit later. But yeah, that was a long discussion on Sevika. I didn't intend for it to be quite that long, but I wanted to talk about her because I haven't really done so in this series, and I think she deserves a bit of the limelight. She's a good character, and yeah, she represents a bunch of interesting things, some nice layers to her. She's not like a triple S character, but she's a good one, for sure, and I like her. And like I said, there is character gaps now, for her to rise more into prominence, and I'd be into that. I'd be into her having more of a role. Like she said to Vander all that time ago, you don't look scared in choosing what you're choosing. You look weak. She wants to align with the strong because that's her best path forward. And how understandable is that in this setting? She's a very solid character. I like her. And there's potential for more growth for her. I think she said in one of the episodes, maybe episode 7 or 8, that she and her old man never saw eye to eye. Maybe there's a bit of a story there. Not sure, but there's potential. Oh, and of course, I said this was an episode of choices. Sevika's choice was very clearly to not kill Silco, to instead kill Finn and go against what they, agreed to. So the next character that is more minor that I'm going to talk about is Medarda Sr., Mrs. Medarda. I'm not going to spend nearly as much time with her as I did with Sevika because I talked about her in episode 8's discussion, and there's not as much to say, but at the same time, I think this episode peeled back the layers very nicely. I think that it's very understandable for her to have the position she has with regards to Noxus, I think is what their homeland is called. That seems to be a culture and society where it's very might makes right. It's very you have to be a fox and a wolf, but the wolf side, I think, has to take prominence in the public eye. You have to be very forceful. You can't be screwing about. You have to have no qualms about killing and sacrificing and doing all these things to make demonstrations of yourself, to portray yourself as powerful. And this is the culture that Mrs. Medarda has grown up in. This is the type of person she's had to become. And so I don't think it's a huge indictment on her that she is so cold and heartless, seemingly, because she's not heartless. But I'll get into that in a second. She hasn't been a great mother to Mel. She hasn't been a good mother to Mel. She exiled her. No matter what the reasons are, no matter if they're a little understandable in a way, that is cruel to do to your own daughter. She's very coldly fox-like in a lot of the decisions she makes. She goes from one child to another. She sort of picks between them depending on which is the better prospect for the future of her family and her empire and her legacy. So that's not something that any good mother would do. But different cultures, different societies. It's understandable why she does these things. She's been raised in this, she's been born and bred in it, and she knows nothing else. This is what she knows of life. You have to be this cold, you have to be this pragmatic and cynical. This goes back generations, I think. I think the show has been clear in establishing that this is something that's deeply rooted, going back generations and generations. So it's just what she knows, it's just her experience. So while chastising the way she goes about things and chastising the way she has not been a nurturing mother in any sense of the word, I don't think she's this cold, brutal, detached psychopath. And the show gives us evidence for that. I think it's understandable that she wants what's best for her family because that's been her deeply ingrained motivation for what seems like her whole life. And she's just doing what she thinks is best to that end. I think that is key to survival and a prosperous future for your family and future generations in Noxus. That's the vibe I got. So it's very understandable that she thinks this way. I love that they add this perspective to her and don't just make her this cold, demeaning mother for no reason. So I love that perspective to her. I love how her overall demeanor and behaviors tell us a lot about that culture. Because that might be something important going forward in future seasons, in Season 2 maybe. I'd love to learn a bit more about Noxus and about where the Medardas come from. We've learned quite a bit already, so it's not entirely necessary, but I think it would be a bit of a missed opportunity to not go there a bit more. But I hinted about the fact that she's not entirely cold and demeaning, and she does have a heart. And that's true because we get the reason for why she exiled Mel all that time ago in this episode. The reason was because Mel softened her. She made her think about what was right, about the moral implications of the things she does, because Mel is so heartfelt in comparison to her and Noxian culture, it seems like, that Mel makes her second-guess these things. These things that she's learned are completely beneficial for her family, these choices that she makes. Mel has made her second-guess whether that is right. She's made her second-guess probably her whole life, the whole way she's been living her life. And that is so difficult for her to deal with because she's been ingrained to think this way, so family is just going to hold out over her daughter, over her other family. But there is that temptation to side with Mel. She made that clear this episode, that sentimentality, that desire to act on your heart rather than your head. Mel brings that out in her. Mel makes her not want to do the cold, pragmatic, right thing for her family, because Mel makes her think about what is right. Mel makes her second guess and want to go against what the correct thing for her family is, the cynical, pragmatic thing. Mel makes her want to go against that and not follow through with that, the way she's been living her whole life. Because Mel is concerned with not what is correct, she's been concerned about what is right. A little bit of a Fate Stay Night reference for you. And Mrs. Medarda cannot stomach that. She can't deal with that. She can't deal with this anguish, and she has to try and steel her heart and compartmentalize so that she can continue leading her family. Because Mel softens her heart so much that she distracts her and gets in the way of her leadership, and doing so would lead to her not benefiting her family as much as she could, which could lead to her family, lowering in the ranks. I think it's clear that the Medardas are a prominent foremost family in Noxus, but it seems like a dog-eat-dog world there. And I think that one slip-up, one wrong decision, one decision where heart is chosen over head, and that could not be the case. That could very easily change, and they could be the family that is overtaken in the same way they overtook that family in the flashback in the beginning of episode 8. So, for the sake of her family, she can't listen to Mel. And so because of that, she exiles her. She can't deal with having her by her side. And she sends her to Piltover, where her sentimentality is not going to get in the way of her ruling, because she views Piltover to be not as cold, not as cutthroat as Noxus. And I think there's actually a parallel. This show is so full of parallels, by the way, holy shit. There's a parallel between her and Vi, Mrs. Medarda and Vi, in just having to just not see her. Not see this person she loves, because I think she does love her, and having to take a break and not see her because she just needs to be separate, because having her in her presence would make her make a decision she regrets. That is very similar to what Vi did with Powder, the decision that led to essentially the birth of Jinx, when she kind of just ran away from her and had to take a breath in that alley. I see a bit of a parallel there. Bit abstract, maybe a bit of a stretch, but I think there's some basis there. But so yeah, my point is that Mrs. Medarda, there are layers to her. She is very human as well. She's very well fleshed out as well. And in only 2 episodes, which is super impressive, but the show is able to establish characterization in the blink of an eye, so not even surprising. So Mrs. Medarda gave Mel a choice. Family or your heart. And that was Mel's major choice in this episode, which I'll get into in a bit. Now, is Mel obligated to go back to her, to go back with her family? No, of course not. She's been treated terribly. But I'm not about to say that it's not understandable from Mrs. Medarda's perspective. It is absolutely understandable. I think they've established enough of the culture for us to see where she's coming from, even if we don't condone what she's done. And also, again, cultural barriers. Different ways of thinking, different ways to have to survive in this land. So yeah, that's about all I have to say about Mrs. Medarda, but she was a great late addition to this cast. I really, really like what she brought to the table. She is classically traditionalist in Noxian culture. It's so deeply ingrained in her, but she has a heart. It's just buried so deep within, and she can't allow it to come to the surface for what she believes is the good of her family. And that's understandable too. So from here, I think the next direction to go would be to the more major characters of the story and of this episode, and the natural place to go would be Mel, because we've just been talking about her. But before I do, I just want to talk for a couple of minutes about Heimerdinger and Ekko. As I said, they don't play much of a role here, so I don't have much to say, and I've talked about their characters at length, especially for Ekko in episode 7, Heimerdinger throughout. in previous discussions. But just to sort of sum up, we have Ekko bringing Heimerdinger to the Firelight's hideout, and Heimerdinger sees sort of the wonders of this place and what he's been able to accomplish with a bit of, elbow grease, a cause, some very good leadership, and some clear focus about the path forward and your ambitions and how to make a lot from very little. Ekko says something very notable when they enter the hideout, and that's, you can't just give people what they need to survive. You have to give them what they need to live. More than just existing. As I discussed that sort of contrast between living versus existing in the pre-time skip, was the situation that Vander had going with Vi, Powder, Clagger, Milo, Ekko, everyone else, Benzo, everything they had. Was that existence, or was that existence and living? A gratifying life experience, a fulfilling life? That was sort of the question I had early on. For some it was living, for some it was just existing. For the Firelights, Ekko made that distinction and said, you need to give them something to live for, not just treading water, whittling the days away in this purgatory, just existing. No, they have to be happy. They have to be optimistic about the future. They have to have a cause. They have to have things to live for. And so that's what he says to Heimerdinger here. Heimerdinger has his eyes open to all sorts of things. From episode 8 into episode 9, he saw the plight of those in the Undercity more bluntly and front-loaded more to him than probably ever before. I'm not sure, he's lived a long life, but I think the tone indicated that this was kind of news to him, seeing the plight of the people in the Undercity. And then he had his eyes open to Ekko and everything Ekko has going on. So I think the implication here is that he's lived for hundreds of years. He's 307 years old. He's seen all sorts of things, but he's also ignorant of all sorts of things. He's had privileges. He's lived a certain way. He has heard about the plight of those in the Undercity, but he hasn't personally experienced it, and he hasn't experienced anything like this anarchist group of the Firelights. So I think this can do nothing but good for Heimerdinger in terms of broadening his awareness. One of the flaws I said he had as a person was not being able to relate to Jayce's and Viktor's conundrums, their pains and preoccupations with the fact that Viktor was going to die. Not seeing the sheer importance of that, the sheer importance of life, of living a life you're proud of and not wanting that to be snuffed out. He felt sorry, he felt grief, he was very genuine, but he wasn't able to entirely see from their point of view. He wasn't able to be completely empathetic. There was a bit of a barrier there. But I think learning from Ekko in this unlikely partnership or unlikely circumstances that they were to meet, I think this will lead to nothing but good things for his sense of perspective, for his knowledge of the world. I think this will enrich his life experience. I think he'll learn a lot of things, and he'll come away from it more mature, more open-minded, with more perspective than before. So I'm interested to see where this goes. This was a bit of an anticlimactic end to both of their arcs. Like I mentioned, I somewhat expected him to be doing something sketchy in the Undercity. I guess that was just like a red herring, or I was seeing something where there wasn't anything. I made a wrong prediction there. And then Ekko had that huge fight and then just kind of stumbled his way back home. So both of these characters ended on a bit of a understated note, but I don't mean to say by saying that it was an anticlimax that it was bad. I mean, there's a second season announced. This story is going to be longer term than just these 9 episodes. Naturally, every character isn't going to have a huge climax in the last episode. There isn't going to be fulfillment for every single character arc, every single plot line in the last episode for a long-running series like this. That would just be too much. It would make the final episode bloated. It wouldn't make it feel natural. So I like that this is just a sort of underlying element. And I'm interested to see where both Ekko and Heimerdinger go. I think they can learn quite a bit from one another. I said that Heimerdinger can learn from Ekko and the Undercity and the Firelights and broaden his perspective. So can Ekko learn from Heimerdinger. He has been naturally, understandably, very much against anything Piltover related. He called them Pilties. He thought of the idea of Vi touring around the Undercity, around Zon, with a Piltie, being Caitlyn, to be blasphemous, it seemed like. He was not open-minded to that at all. He didn't have any inclination to want to do anything like that. He looked at it as some sort of sin. And that's understandable given his upbringing, given what everyone from Piltover has done to him, to his life, to the people he loves. But through Caitlyn, he's brought in his perspective as well. He's seen that there are people who, despite Caitlyn saying initially that he was wrong about the Enforcers, that she didn't really believe him initially, he knows that that doesn't come from a place of ill intent, that she's not trying to be rude or disrespectful. That's just how she's lived. And I think by the end, he's gotten quite a bit of respect for Caitlyn, and that's broadened his mind and made him see that there are good people from there. As much as the world may have seemed to indicate otherwise earlier in his life, I think he now thinks that Caitlyn is a good indicator of good people from there, and that may lead to the potential of more good people from there. I think learning from Heimerdinger and what Heimerdinger's all about could help broaden his perspective more. He can learn more about Piltover, and from the perspective of someone who's lived in higher society. That would be great for his life experience, for learning about the world. We'll see where that goes, but I think it's very promising for both of these characters. They're a good, natural fit for one another for future developments and progress. So now, after that, we go back to Mel. We have that scene where she confronts her mother. I think it's great material for her. We see that she's very upset at her for manipulating Jayce in that way, for nudging him in that direction, because she knows who Jayce is at heart, and she knows that this will only do harm to his psyche in one way or another, whether he completely goes through with this and continues on that path, or whether it's just going to cause internal turmoil for him. And perhaps more than anything, it will lead to war, which is something that she's well versed in. Jayce isn't, and doesn't fully realize the ramifications of. Either way, she just sees it as a bad plan, and she lambasts her mother for putting things in that direction. We have since learned, progressively since episode 6, that she is a sentimental, heartfelt person. She is the opposite of what I may have guessed she was early on in episode 2, 3, 4, a pure manipulator. There's this dualism to her. On one side, she can't help but feel love for her family, as she mentioned in episode 7. Despite what they've done to her, despite how cruelly they've treated her, particularly her mother, she can't help but feel love for them. They are her family. Those bonds are not easily severed at all. So I think that's understandable. She has that irrational love for them. She knows it's foolish, but she can't stop it. On the other, everything they stand for, everything they do, is something she doesn't approve of. She tried to play that game early on, but she was never suited for it, as we see for that flashback. She was never suited to being a fox and a wolf. She can be a fox, she can't quite be a wolf. And so we have this sense of Medarda's heart, her true heart, where her heart lies, what she wants out of life, what she wants out of the world, how she wants to impact the world. She doesn't want to lead to war. She doesn't want there to be conflict. She wants there to be prosperity for her and the people she loves, and she doesn't want there to be cruelty, which is what happens in Noxus. On the other hand, there's this desire to be loved by this family, to be accepted by this family, to take the throne, to become the heir. She has this desire to do that for sure. She wanted to prove to them this whole time that she could lead Piltover, she could benefit Piltover, Piltover could become a big power, a superpower with her, to prove them wrong and to, I think, show them that they can accept her, this irrational love for them, this want to be accepted and acknowledged as impressive and acknowledged as worthy of the name Medarda. So there's that longing for acceptance and love from her family and her true desires in life. They're always at odds with each other. I think it's been made clear that she wants the best for Piltover. She wants it to become a prosperous city through Jayce and Hextech and everything he's been doing with Viktor. She wants things to progress, and she wants very much the same things that Jayce and Viktor want. A better world for this technology to benefit society. She said to Jayce in episode 5 before they have sex with one another, I think she said something like, the Medardas are used to taking away from the world. We aren't used to giving something back. I thought that may have been manipulative in that episode, because right before it, she makes advances towards him. That all could have been played from a manipulative point of view if her character went in another direction. Now that we know what we know about her, I think that was very genuine. She wants to give back to Piltover. She wants there to be progress. At the same time, she has more than one ambition. People are multifaceted. Human beings, there can be multiple motivations for why they do certain things. For this, she wanted to do it for her own status within her family, to impress them, to get respect from them, from her mother, and she also wanted to benefit Piltover. And then also, she ended up caring for Jayce. It turns out that her feelings were very genuine. She has his well-being at the forefront of her mind at this point. She has suddenly become one of the most heartfelt characters in the cast, and that's really snuck up on me. And it would seem like it's seemingly out of nowhere, but I really don't think it is, because up until episode 5, it could go either way. I was guessing. She kept me guessing the whole time. And you might say, wow, suddenly she's so heartfelt in episode 6, she's so emotional, so she has her heart on her sleeve automatically, immediately in episode 6. But I think there are a lot of natural reasons for that. Firstly, I think there's the possibility that she was crushing on Jayce. She had developed feelings for him. Those weren't purely manipulative advances. But I also think that there's the chance that she didn't realize quite how strong they were until they had that night together. Then she realized, oh boy, like, I might potentially love this guy. And then so realizing that and being confronted with that, it changes a person in a certain way. And so I don't think her feelings from Jayce came out of nowhere. I just think they might have been heightened by that. That's a very real, believable development. Also, in conjunction with that, we were never given the proper perspective to see internalization of Mel. We were never given her internal thoughts. She was never given a self-reflective scene about her thoughts on things and her true desires and her motivations and the way she feels about certain things until episode 6, that scene with her and Jayce, where she expressed sympathy for Viktor, talked about her exile from her family. We saw that longing and yearning in her eyes. We saw her love for art. All of these sensitive aspects to Mel underneath the hard, cold exterior. We never saw that up until episode 6, but it wasn't a sudden development. We had just not been given the point of view to see that. The story just never went in the direction where she would be in a position where doing that would be beneficial or natural for her character. She plays that Game of Thrones. She's great at it. She's a fox. She's not going to be vulnerable to just anyone. She's going to pick her spots very, very deliberately. And the first place where she picked her spot was with the person she grew to care for very deeply, with Jayce, the first time she truly chose to be vulnerable. Before that, when did she ever have an opportunity to do that? Where would that have been a smart thing to do for someone as intelligent as Mel? She didn't have a chance. And so I think that's a very natural way for the story to organically peel layers back and give us a sudden realization without it being jarring or out of nowhere, or a complete left field development. So I like what they did with Medarda in that respect. It's very organic, but also keeps us guessing. You know, Medarda was one of the characters that kept me guessing the entire way through, and now she remains to be one of the most interesting characters, but for a different reason, because of the heart in her. I admire her heart and sentimentality so much. That's something I can relate to. I'm quite a sentimental person as well. So yeah, she just has so many dimensions to her, and she's given us so much to ponder, and I really think she's a great character. She's one of the better ones in the story. And that dualism I mentioned, that is something that remains a key factor in her character deep into this episode. We have that scene with her and her mother. Her mother says a beautiful, brilliant line, "I would set the world ablaze to protect our family." That tells you so much about Mrs. Medarda and what she's all about. What a line. So much conviction and fire there. Then she goes into how Mel's sentimentality weakened her, and that's why she exiled her. And then she eventually comes back home to the root, the heart of how she feels about her daughter, of their relationship. She has not treated her well, but regardless, she wants the best for her daughter, and so she gives her what is essentially very tough love, this ultimatum. She has to choose between the dual sides of herself, Mel does. She says, we have to weaponize. We have to have Piltover make this weapon and go on the offensive. We have to induce warfare. This has to happen. This has to be done. And she says, once this happened, once Hextech is used for these means, you can take my side as rightful heir of the family. That is something that Mel has been yearning for her entire life. She tried to do this as a child, as a teenager in that flashback. She was trying to do that with what she was doing politically in Piltover and trying to raise herself from episode 2 here, and it continued. And she still has that desire to be accepted by her family. That irrational love, as she describes it, paraphrasing, but that's essentially what it is. This is something she has wanted, and it is right in front of her. All she has to do is nudge things even further in the way she has been doing to fully weaponize and go offensive. But she has this hatred for warfare. I now think I have the full context of why she told Viktor and Jayce to weaponize after she got the letter from home in episode 7. It's very much that dualism. She probably got word that her mother was coming. Her mother may have said to weaponize in the letter. I'm not quite sure. Either way, I think she knew what her mother would have wanted by coming here. And so it's very much a compromise between both sides. You know, we need to weaponize, but, you know, we'll only do it for defense. That was a genuine thing she said. We'll only do it for defense. She wasn't doing that to sort of just start it and telling a lie. That was just a compromise because she hadn't fully decided yet. And she still hasn't decided here when she is given this choice. Family or heart. Because while she does love her family, making the decision to go with her family would not be going with her heart. She would have to make a choice to close off that side of herself. And so she's given this choice. This is her choice in the episode, and it is such a difficult one. But in the end, her words get through to Jayce. Jayce realizes what she's been saying, and he agrees after his experiences. And he says, I don't care about looking good to the council. I don't care if the council approves of me, but I do care about what you think of me. He says this to Mel. And because I agree with you. You were right. This is the path forward. We need prosperity. We need equality going forward. Otherwise, it will just lead to more terrible war. The war that you've been warning me against. And so she makes the decision to side with him. She agrees with him. She sees the man she probably loves. I think she loves Jayce at this point, making this decision that goes with her heart's desire. And I think that, seeing what he and Viktor had decided to do, I think that is what causes her to make her decision. That's what causes her to eventually say, you know what? Heart over family. She essentially says, I do not want to be the heiress of this Noxian dynasty if it means being cruel, if it means being this cruel wolf, if it means inducing warfare. I do not want this. I want what I believe is right, and that is foregoing that and choosing peace, choosing truce, choosing a truce with Silco, choosing a truce with the Undercity. And so, her action of removing the ring is indicative of that. She made her choice there. It was a very difficult choice, but in the end, I think it was the choice that was most close to her heart, that she valued the most. She forgoes her blood for her heart. And I think it's a beautiful manifestation and culmination of the person she is, and a culmination of her character arc, and how far she's come. But then, of course, things are not quite as simple as them all agreeing on this policy. We have an unwelcome interruption from Jinx. More on that a bit later. This is going to be such a long video. And so from here, I want to sort of ramp up to the characters I have the most to say about in terms of this episode. So I'm going to start with Caitlyn. I obviously had more to say about Medarda and Mel and Sevika and even Ekko and Heimerdinger, but I got to do a little bit of a mention for Caitlyn. I don't have much to say about her. I think that everything she had to do in this episode was pretty natural and in character. She was essentially a passenger for most of it, which was her role for this episode, which is fine. You know, she had lots of time to shine in the earlier episodes, lots of time to show off her characterization, and we got a lot of that. And I think that her role in this episode was quite functional for what Jinx ended up doing, giving Vi this ultimatum. But I also got a bit of a hint through the last shot of them sort of crying together, awful, harrowing scene at Jinx's weapon bazooka thing heading towards the council room. And the shot of them sort of silhouetted against the red moon. I got the feeling that with the choice that Jinx made at the end of this episode, which I'll discuss soon, I got the feeling that with that choice, that essentially ensured that Vi would have to act a certain way in the future. I think that will make, I'll talk about Vi in a second, but I think that will make Vi be forced to make a choice in one direction. And that's not a very feel-good direction, but I think that direction will ensure that Caitlyn ends up being, if not the primary, one of the primary things in Vi's life permanently now. I think Caitlyn may fulfill the role that Powder fulfilled earlier in the sense of being the most important person in Vi's life. Not sure, that might be a stretch, but I can see that happening. Vi has lots of things she's connected to. She's connected to Ekko. She's connected to different aspects of the Undercity. She has lots of dimensions to her life. So maybe it's a stretch to say that Caitlyn will be the most important thing to her in the future, but I think that she will be one of the most important things. And I think that Jinx's choice has ironically set that in stone, because Vi will have to do certain things as a result of her choice that I think will nudge Caitlyn in that direction, whereas that might not have happened before if Jinx acted a different way. So I just find that interesting. Caitlyn's a really good character. I enjoyed her throughout the first season. I love her conviction. I love her no bullshit attitude. I love the way she has a clear focus on her goals, her parallels with Vander, the way she's so open-minded and empathetic, and despite her biases that are the result of being born and bred and nurtured in a certain direction, she is willing to try and overcome them, to understand different perspectives and integrate them into her worldviews. I think Caitlyn's really interesting, and I love her dynamic with Vi. Now, with regards to Vi herself, like I said, I think that she was there for Jinx, for Powder. I think that up until the very end, she was telling the absolute truth in saying that I will help you, I will be there for you, we're sisters, I'm here for you, blah, 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 I'm never going to abandon you. I don't think she would ever have done any of those things. I think she would have accepted Powder in her eyes as she was, and I think she would have worked with that, and I think she would have done her best to love her sister, accept what she is now, and try to give her a life from this point on, to put her into a healthier mind space and all of that. I think that she would have done her utmost. However, the choice that Jinx made at the end, to sit in the Jinx chair, to forego Powder, which I'll discuss later, like I said. The decision she made to blow up the council room, you can't go back from things like that. And I think that will cause Vi to reflect on things, reflect on the way she looked at Powder/Jinx. I think this will cause her to realize the gravity of what she's become. I think that this may cause her to see not Powder anymore, but Jinx. Maybe she'll start calling her by that now. But either way, that's something you can't go back from. And I think that that sort of destruction, that choice that she made in hurting all these people, in doing this horrible, horrible act, that decision in choosing the version of herself that Silco loved, not the version that Vi grew to know and love, I think that will have an effect on Vi, and I think she may now view her as an enemy. I don't know if she'll say that Powder isn't in there anymore. I think that might be possible. I don't know which way she's going to go with that. But either way, I think she might view her as an enemy, as too far gone to be brought back onto their side without some sort of conflict, which was never the case before. But I don't know if maybe that's changed. What Jinx did at the end could lead to that changing. Very, very much so. So I'm interested to see where Vi will go from here with regards to her attitude towards her sister. Will she say, I need to take her down? Will she be a bit more reserved than that, more withdrawn from that? I'm not sure. There could be a variety of directions it goes in, but I think no matter what, something has changed here with the way she looks at her. But now I want to talk about something else with her. I've talked in the Sevika section about how Vi is not really thinking things through in terms of her crusades and just is kind of just a loose cannon, just taking her rage out on things. And I want to talk a bit more about that. We see a vision that Vi sees in the bar while she's fighting Sevika of Vander. She has never stopped thinking about him, about what he would say to her, about the advice he would give her. He was her father. She can't erase that part of her life. She's forever fixated on Vander. And that vision of Vander says to her, she still needs you, speaking of Powder. So there's obvious implications for that. No need to really delve into that much. She still needs her. Obvious. She's always thought that. But I also think that he says something that's interesting. He said, I wish I could tell you that it gets easier, kiddo. Vi is Vander's successor, very much so. However, Vander, the key aspect of his character is that he eventually learned to put down the gauntlets, to walk away from war, to temper his rage and hatred and his emotions in favor of what's better for his people in their situation, to make these deals, to establish the status quo that allows them to live. Vander is defined by his ability to act with his head over his heart sometimes in favor of his heart's desire, in favor of the people he loves. Vi is definitely not there. She is thinking purely with her heart on her sleeve. She is just taking out her rage on whatever she can take out her rage on. Sevika being the focus of that in this particular time. She is not an embodiment of who Vander became, but she is very much representative of who Vander was before he dropped the gauntlets. I think that she's in that point of her development, of where Vander was before he put down those gauntlets, before he gave up war. And she just so fixated on her rage and taking out her rage and all that stuff. And when he says, I wish I could tell you it gets easier, kiddo, I think he's talking about that. He's obviously talking about her general journey towards trying to help Powder, but I also think he's talking about the journey towards peace of mind and giving up and tempering your rage and your hatred at this injustice and all of that. Because Vi is not able to do this. She has so much difficulty with doing this. And this vision of Vander acknowledges that. It's not going to be easy to do this. And you can understand exactly why she has so much trouble doing this. But for her own sake, she can't continue living this way. She can't continue just being this loose cannon, because it will destroy her. And I think she's got to learn to be a bit more open-minded, to have broader perspective. I think Caitlyn could potentially help her with that. Either way, She is Vander's prodigy. She is Vander's legacy, his successor, his spiritual successor. But at this point in her development, she is the version of Vander before his enlightenment, so to speak. And I think this is sort of the halfway point for her character in terms of getting there. Maybe a bit less than halfway. Because if she is to be Vander's prodigy, she is going to have to reach that point where she understands that eventually. Maybe she'll never get there. But if she is to be him in totality, that's what's going to have to happen. And she is not nearly there yet. She has a lot of growing and a lot of learning to do. And she's going to have to face some very difficult things to overcome that and become that sort of person. But nothing worth having comes easy. And while I think that sort of mindset could benefit her and the people around her in the future of her cause, it is not easy at all, given what she's experienced. And she's going to have to grapple with that. And she has even more to deal with now that she's seen her sister become this. So yeah, Vi, great character. I've thought she was great from episode 1, and she remains to be great in episode 9. And I'm super invested in seeing where she goes from here. And so now we're winding down a little bit in terms of the characters left, at least. I'm sure that there is a lot of time left in this discussion still. But in terms of the characters, we're winding down a bit. There are only a few left that I have to talk about. 4, in fact. And I think I'm going to start with Viktor. So Viktor was special to me in this episode. He did one of the most admirable things I've seen a fictional character do in a long time. And yet, he's not portrayed as this patron saint of Hextech or virtue or this extremely good person who did nothing wrong. There's tons of substance and layers to what he did and how he came to arrive at this extremely admirable notion. So we start with Viktor at the end of the horrible incident he had in episode 8, where Skye, his assistant, the girl that he met all that time ago who was curious about him in episode 6 when he was a young boy, died trying to save him. Her dying was very harrowing for him, for the viewer, but also there's a lot of context behind it that I didn't really talk about in episode 8. I think she's representative of the idea that Singe said something to Viktor. He said that love and status and things like that are the sacrifices we make in the sake for progress. Viktor had his eyes focused purely on progress for so much of his life, especially once he started seeing that his health was declining. And I think that Skye consistently represented this warmth, this human warmth, and this idea of a life of love, because I think it's clear that she had romantic interest in him, or at the very least deeply cared about him. And so I think she represented this idea of this potential other life Viktor could have had, this other aspect to his life, if he didn't want to focus so solely on his innovation and progression. When they first meet, when she's that little girl swimming by the waterfall or by the lake or whatever when they're kids, he's focused on making his toy boat. She looks at him in curiosity and is interested in him, and he looks up at her and she gets called and goes away. But ever since then, she had what seems to be an interest in him. She became his assistant for him and Jayce, and she constantly seems to be making sideways glances at him, looking at him, concerned about his well-being, telling him he should, stop working, take care of his health, asking him if he can walk together with her, making very slight but very heartwarming and sweet, affectionate advances to him to try to give him some rest, to try to give him some human warmth, because more than anyone in the series, he could have used that. Because more than almost anyone else in the series, Viktor could have used that. And yet, at every turn, he actively chose to make the decision to dismiss that possibility. She asked him to walk home with him. Sorry, I gotta be sleeping here tonight. I'm working on my Hextech, on this Hextech core. He never went for that. And so I think as he sees the dust of her corpse, as she's been disintegrated by this Hex core, not only does he feel regret and guilt for a reason I'll get into in a second, I think that he feels that he's lost a life that he could have had. Maybe it was a life of potential love, maybe a life of a deep friendship, a lifelong friendship. I think it leans towards romantic, but either way, a deep connection. Had he decided to pursue that, to spend time with her, she was always focused on him, always focused on trying to make him feel less stress, less anxiety, to ease his burdens, and that is so sweet of her. She clearly cared for him, but he forgoed that every time, and I think in seeing what happened to her, he regrets that. He feels so much grief. And not only did she sacrifice herself to save him, but it's his fault. It's his fault. This is his responsibility. Her blood is on his hands, metaphorically. But at the same time, this isn't a huge indictment or huge criticism of him, because it's not like he intended for this to happen, and the mistake he made was so very human and understandable. Common theme throughout this whole show. Every character doing things that are very in-character, believable, consistent, and human. What happened is, his leg was healed. For the first time in his life, he was able to run freely. He just let out this adrenaline-fueled scream of joy. And it brings a tear to your eye of how emotional and gratifying it is for him, even if it seems like that may be the first step on a trajectory towards some unsavory things, which it ended up being. But nonetheless, it's such a great moment for Viktor, and you love that for him. And so fueled by that, he wants more. He gets a taste of this, of not being crippled anymore, and he wants more. He now wants to solve his full health problems, I guess. I'm guessing that's what he was doing, trying to prevent this disease that was taking his life from him. I'm guessing that was the next step, and what he was trying to do. In this adrenaline-fueled rush of blood to the head, he just wants to keep going more and more, and he just felt so much gratification and fulfillment in being able to run for the first time in so long, perhaps the first time in his life, that he just had to. He had to have more once he'd had this taste. And who knows, maybe if he just kept going with the experiment as he had done it in the first place, things may have been okay. I harbor some doubts about that, but it's definitely a better possibility than the alternative, which happened, which was he was out of shimmer. He didn't inject shimmer into his body to make him receptive to the hex core. Yet he did it anyway. He went through with it anyway because he was just so desperate for further change, further positive change. That is not something you should be doing. You are meddling with something you don't fully understand and not making the proper precautions that were necessary in the first place to make this work. Very stupid decision of Viktor, unfortunately, but very understandable reason behind that stupid decision. And so you feel so sympathetic because in that moment he just wanted to feel powerful, to feel like he was not doomed for death, like his body wasn't eroding for the first time. It's again that draw of science, that draw of innovation that promises so much possibility. But you can't be reckless, just like Heimerdinger said. He had many good points, and this is one of them. And so it leads to the death of an important person in his life, a potential for a future. There was a potential for a future with this person, and he will never see her again. And it's on his hands. That's rough. It's understandable why he did these things, and it isn't like he had intent to do this, but regardless, it's because he was reckless with his experiment and just rushed forward without properly adhering to caution before getting lost in his ambition. But in seeing what happened, he is immediately brought down to earth. He immediately sees what his mistake was, and he makes up his mind, which he voices in the next scene to Jayce. But before that, I just want to say, the hex core, after taking in Sky's life force or whatever happened there, it took on a different appearance. It seems to be more organic, less technological. It seems to be, I don't know, but it seems to have taken some of the flesh, maybe from his hand, maybe from Sky. Either way, it's looking more organic and a little humanoid or something like that. So it seems to take within it the things that are given to it. Seems to have a bit of a life of its own, which is scary. You can't tamper with this sort of thing. And I think that is something that Viktor picked up on and clocked because he saw it. And that's why he makes the decision ultimately to destroy it, as he says to Jayce. But I want to just contextualize the things he says here, because it's hard to put into words the decision he makes here. He realized that he had gone too far. He realized what all of his ambition had led to, how harmful it was, how volatile the hex core was. It promises so much, but it can also take away so much at the snap of a finger. It is dangerous. It is volatile. It is what Heimerdinger warned them about. And he realizes this, and so he says to Jayce, we have to destroy it. But before that, overcome by grief, by guilt, by seeing what he had done, probably in the back of his mind he was also thinking, do I not have much time to live anyway? It seemed that in being shocked by the hex core, it caused some sort of regression in his state. His leg seemed to be injured again. He was crippled again. He was using the cane. It caused this regression, and he was a bit weak and sickly again, back to old Viktor physically. So I think in the back of his mind, he's thinking, how much life do I have to live? burdened by regret, by grief, seeing what all their good intent had led to, and being distraught and disturbed by that. I think he looks over the ledge there, and he's definitely thinking about it. And in an exact mirror image reflection of how he saved Jayce's life, Jayce comes in. Am I interrupting something? Beautiful symmetry there. Jayce saves him here the way he was saving Jayce. It's just some beautiful symmetry there. He's thinking of jumping off, and Jayce stops him. I'm going to be actually talking a bit about Jayce, so that's going to bleed into Viktor's little section, but I think that's impossible given how their journeys intertwine in this episode. They speak of and reminisce on less serious, more innocent times of conventions in the past that they had fun at, and they're just thinking, how did it come to this? And Viktor says, with the most admirable thing, one of the most admirable things I've seen in this show. He says to Jayce, you have to destroy the Hex Core. He tried himself to do it. He couldn't do it. It's his life's work. It's everything he dreamed about. It's so hard for him to pull the trigger and properly destroy it. He can't do it. He doesn't have it within him. And more than anything, it represents the potential path for him to escape his death sentence, to live longer, to bring about the legacy he always dreamed of, to make a name for himself. It represents saving him. And yet, in the service of what is right, he says that... I just got choked up a little bit there. This is so much emotion packed into this. He says that you have to destroy it. He forgoes his life. He forgoes his life's work, everything he's been working towards. He forgoes innovation, which he has been living for since he was a little kid, for the sake of what's right. I can't put into words how much I admire that, how much he learned from his mistake there, so with such conviction. It is impossible to describe how difficult that decision is for him. He has to die for this. That is the decision he makes. He's giving up his life. He says to Jayce, promise me, I need you to destroy it. And Jayce accepts, with a hand on his shoulder. And then Viktor says what is one of the most emotionally charged lines in this whole series, one of my favorite lines in this whole series. I was overcome with emotion when I saw it, and just seeing this made me realize how much I love this partnership. This partnership might be my favorite, and this series has tons and tons of beautiful partnerships, but I think this might be my favorite dynamic within the series. Definitely top 2 at the very least. And so Viktor says, we lost ourselves, we lost our dream. In the pursuit of great, we failed to do good. Now, Jayce accepting this burden of having to destroy it, having to pull the trigger essentially, metaphorically, on his friend, on his brother, and ensuring that he cannot be healed in service of this greater good, immense conviction from Jayce as well. An immensely admirable thing from his perspective as well. Not as admirable as Viktor, but that is supreme conviction from him too. I'll get into him a bit more, but what I'm saying here is, this line says so much. In the pursuit of great, we failed to do good. Viktor, in seeing his life tick away, became obsessed with doing as much as he can as quickly as he can, of through any means trying to find a way to save his own life and continue innovating and make a name for himself, to leave more than the figments he talked to Heimerdinger about. And in doing so, he lost someone very dear to him, and he saw what horrible things this sort of technology can bring about. He dabbled too much in the dark arcane arts. He dabbled too much in things he didn't fully understand. In the pursuit of that greatness, he failed to do good and realize why they were doing this in the first place, and realize that what he was doing was so against the purpose of why he wanted to do this in the first place, benefiting society. Meanwhile, Jayce, less to do with the sort of arcane arts, the magic, dark magic side of these things, less to do with the way that Viktor accepted the things he hated about Singed and the dark side of discovery and innovation. It's more to do with dabbling in sociopolitics that he was not fond of, becoming a bit more of a man who was more cynical, cutthroat than he ever wanted to be, using the technology he wanted to simply benefit society and show people the wonders of magic for warfare. That is where he strays. It is so against what he was doing in the first place. No matter how he rationalized it, it was so against what he wanted to do. And in the end, Jayce realized this once he is confronted with what weaponizing Hextech meant in the face of that little kid. I'll get there, I promise. But the point is, they both strayed in the service of being distracted by this greatness in differing ways. They failed to stay loyal to why they did this in the first place. And once they lost sight of that, there was always going to be consequences. Immense ones for Viktor, slightly less immense ones for Jayce, but still deeply, deeply sad ones. And so that quote, I think, is a great encapsulation of everything Viktor is. It says so much about who he is as a man, who he is as a person. And for someone who had innovation and progress and leaving a name for himself at the forefront of his mind for the vast majority of his life, in the end, the choice he makes is to forego all of that to do what's right. And that is his defining moment here. He and Jayce strayed and drifted, and like I said, they ebbed and flowed, and they went back and forth, especially Jayce, but Viktor as well, in different directions, but eventually they met back at the middle. They met and saw that common bond between them, why they're kindred spirits, why they became partners in the first place, and they agreed to do what was right. And so this naturally brings us to Jayce. I've talked about him already. I talked about him a lot, and that smile he had in the beginning of this discussion. I talked about some of the things that overlap with Viktor, so there are some things I'm not going to dwell on as much because I already covered them, but he was absolutely one of the stars of this episode, and I was so proud of some of the things he did, despite him being a very flawed person and doing very flawed things, of course. I said that I immediately got emotional at the start of the episode, and that's because of Jayce's reaction to what he had done to the boy, to killing him. This is what had been brought about by his actions. This is an example, a taster of what gets brought about by war. And I was questioning, is he going to go ahead and continue on this path knowing what this brought about? Or is he going to regress back to himself? And immediately seeing his face, how he reacted to this, the answer was clear. This was far too much. This was enough for him. And him literally killing this child, unforgivable thing to do, showed him this is a glimpse of war, and it's terrifying. It's horrible. There are no victors from here. This isn't what he wanted. And he does not want his weapons to be at the core of this sort of conflict. Never. That is horrible for him. Vi walks away with his weapon anyway, because he just can't bring himself to fight her, but he takes his hammer away, he takes himself away from the equation. And as I kind of predicted, his partnership with Vi ended up being a short-lived one. They just didn't see eye to eye on this sort of thing. Vi charged ahead, viewed stopping Silco at any cost, no matter the collateral damage, to be the right thing to do, and Jayce was not a fan of any of the collateral damage. He saw that as being in conflict with the cause, and he didn't want to do that, and it reminded him that he had completely lost sight of why he did this in the first place, just as Viktor did. So he walks away from this, and I was so happy that he did, because from a biased personal standpoint, that's what I wanted. I wanted him to re-find himself. He had been drifting the most in Episode 7, Episode 8, particularly Episode 8, but that reality check he got was enough for him to check himself and back up and go, who is Jayce Tallis really? Is it this person who goes on these crusades and continuously ramps up and is okay with kids dying, innocent kids dying, and just saying that, to make an omelet you gotta break a few eggs? He is not okay with that. That is not him, and he realizes this, and he acts. He has been manipulated and pushed and pulled and nudged in different directions by different people. By Mel, by Heimerdinger to an extent, by Mel's mother. His decisions have always been his own, but he's been nudged and manipulated in ways that made him make the decisions in a way that forced his hand a little bit. Viktor's circumstances, the things that Mel told him. You get the feeling that some of those decisions he might not have made of his own accord without the influence of others, but this is his biggest show of conviction. This is his choice to not go forward and towards war, to decide that there must be equality here. That is one of the only decisions he makes throughout this series that he makes of his own accord, completely of his own conviction, uninfluenced by other factors. And it is his biggest decision. So he does something that he would never have even thought about an episode prior. He meets with Silco. He is desperate for this peace because he does not want harm to come to the citizens of Zaun or Piltover. He says straight up, I have seen what war looks like, and you don't stand a chance against Hextech. And he's right. He's right. He's not a scrub or anything, but he was not battle ready, and the weapons he used completely destroyed Silco's army of little mutant shimmer soldiers, or whatever they were. Put that in the hands of people who are battle ready, battle hardened, like Vi. like military enforcers that are trained and everything, and it is game over. So, like Silco says, he's a little wet around the ears. He's overplaying his hand a little, having gone forward and disrupted his Shimmer stores and attacked them and done all that, and then brokering for peace. It makes his intentions very clear. So this means that he's not in a position to tell Silco, you're demanding too much, because it makes it clear that he needs this agreement. And in the end, all the things that Silco demands, which essentially elevates Zahn to more or less equal status with Piltover, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I realized. I might be missing something, but that seemed more or less like what it meant. Sovereignty, blanket, amnesty, use of the Hex Gates, all of that, all those demands. That is what Silco demanded. That is what Jayce sort of kind of objected to at first. But in the end, he doesn't have much of a problem with it, because as he said to the council later, who are we? We can't even understand these people. We can't understand their plight. Who are we to say that they can't live on more or less equal standing with us? This is something we need to agree to for a better world, a better society. So he objects to it at first, but I feel like at heart it isn't something that he is totally opposed to at all. In the end, he's okay with them self-governing, for amnesty for his people for their crimes and anything that may have caused them to be looked down upon in the eyes of the law in Piltover. Essentially, they're going to be this own independent nation who are granted rights and camaraderie and communication and collaboration with Piltover. That seems like pretty close to equal standing, and Jayce, in the end, accepts that and is okay with that, and conveys that to the council. So, he objects here. I don't think he has much of a problem with it, in all honesty. I think the main reason he might have objected is because he feels like he can't sell those sorts of things to the council as reasonable for them to agree to this. And then he makes his demands as well. Point is, he goes to great lengths to make deals with this person that I think he still despises, but does this in service of this greater goal. And that speaks a lot of him, as does destroying the Hextech core. Now, this isn't a direct parallel to what happened in episode 2, where he was faced with losing all of his work, any potential of his magic research getting out into the world. Because hextechs are established, there are weapons out there that have hex cores, gemstones, but the hex core represented so much of a huge leap. Hextech that evolves and develops, and it represented exponential growth for his industry, for the innovation in society. So it was huge. It was the cornerstone of the way forward for Hextech, and it represented saving Viktor's life, and yet he gave up all of that to do what was right. But now he's matured. I find it so interesting and so great, because he goes through all of these things. He drifts, he comes back, he goes a little dark, he comes back, he stays with Viktor, he goes and does these political things, he weaponizes, he agonizes, he looks into the past and the history of society's past and the dangers of magic. He then decides to use it anyway. He forges these weapons. He goes with Vi. He goes against Vi. There's so much internal turmoil and conflict. And in the end, he returns to the person he always was. He returns to Jayce Tallis, but more experienced, more matured, more layers and things to fall back on in life, whereas before, his research being taken away from him meant that he had nothing and wanted to kill himself. Now, the Hex Core being taken away, again, I acknowledge this isn't everything about Hextech being taken away. It's already out there in the world, but it's still a huge thing being taken away, plus his friend's life, and he has so much to live for, so much to benefit society with. He has experienced and seen the plight of these people, and he knows the way forward, I think. And he conveys that to the council, with Viktor, for whatever life he has left, and Mel at his side. At this point, I see him as a great leader with this viewpoint, with this matured viewpoint in his mind. He's wiser, more mature than he's ever been, with those very same ideals, not corrupted in any way. This is a false corruption arc. It had the makings of a corruption arc, but it always gave the evidence for there being potential for a false one, where he almost goes there, and he did something unforgivable, and he did something that he can never take back. Let's not ignore that. But he takes it no further, and he says, okay, I've done something horrible. From this point, what can I do to do what's right? And he goes back to himself. And I love that. It's so human, and it's so Jayce. Every decision he made along the way was burdened with pressures and anxiety, and every decision he made, he thought he was doing for the right reasons, even if it didn't end up that way. But he never loses sight of himself. every time, there's always something that shows us that he has not forgotten himself. As much as it may seem he's in the process of forgetting himself, he always comes back. There's a beautiful line said by Silco when he's at Vander's statue and thinking about the proposal that Jayce gave to him for this amnesty and sovereignty for Zon. And he's agonizing over this, and he says in exasperation about Jayce, he didn't even haggle. He didn't even haggle. He just presented these things and said, you know what? I accept, you can have this, which is again another indicator that he really didn't have much of a problem with that in the first place. But this line is beautiful because this is said in episode 1 by Ekko about Jayce. A little background info that is provided to us about Jayce in episode 1 is that Ekko found Jayce's apartment and where he lived. I actually think it was lent to him by the Kiramans, by Caitlyn's parents. I'm not exactly sure. Either way, Ekko found that apartment because he tailed him after he bought some stuff to experiment with from Benzo's. So he followed him there, he tailed him there, he found, oh, this guy's got lots of stuff. He told Vi and Powder and all of them, you should try and do a heist at this place. He's got lots of nice stuff. And so Ekko met Jayce when he came in to buy that stuff. And what does he say about him? He didn't even haggle. Silco says the exact same thing about him, years later, nearly a decade later, or however long the time skip is. And not only is that a cool callback, of which there were a few in this episode, but it speaks so much of how Jayce at heart has not changed. He has progressed in lots of different ways. His character has experienced a huge developmental arc in dark ways and in ways that regress back. In the end, Jayce Talos has stayed true to who he is. It's a cute little callback to the first episode, but it also just describes how he has not changed at heart. He has just become more matured by this experience. He has just become more open-minded. And Silco illustrates that through this line. Jayce has been impulsive, he's contradicted himself, he's made mistakes, he's human, he's flawed, he's gone dark in some ways, he's done horrible things in some ways. But in the end, Jayce is still Jayce. And he always comes back to what's important. Him and Viktor came back to what's important. Now, as gratifying and admirable and great it is to see all of that, and to be proud of Viktor and Jayce for what they did here, in the end, I don't think this is gonna stick. Jinx's act of shooting the missile in the council room, it's gonna lead to something that's gonna cause one or both of these characters to go back on what they said. The Hex core is not destroyed yet. Viktor told Jayce that he needs to destroy it, but Jayce, we never see him destroying it, so I think that's a pretty good indicator of the fact that he hasn't destroyed it. Not to mention, it's a great plot device for later on, for a potential corruption arc for one of them, or for magic to spiral out of control anyway, despite them having intents to not let that happen. So the Hex core is looming in the background, and it will play a role, I'm sure. And this, whatever happens here, maybe Mel dies, maybe it badly injures Jayce or Viktor, maybe something else happens that causes them to go back on what they said, and maybe there's immense death on the council, and they say, you know what, we should not have peace with these people. Yes, we need to weaponize. Something is going to happen here that's going to cause one or both of them to go back on all this development. And that's why it's so bittersweet. I have such a heavy heart when I talk about these sorts of things, because I'm pretty sure they're not going to last. I'm pretty sure that the Hex core's going to be a factor, maybe for Viktor, because it doesn't seem right for Viktor to, despite accepting his life's imminent end, to die in that fashion. I think the Hex core is going to play a factor. It may prolong his life. Something's going to happen, and despite these two going back and realizing who they are, and all of that, I don't think it's going to stick, and that's so sad to me. We'll have to see in Season 2 what will come about from this development. Will Mel die, causing Jayce to spiral? Will something happen causing Viktor to want to go back and say, you know what, I need this Hex core, I need to help us fight back, so I need to live and progress these things. I don't know. Either way, both of these character arcs were absolutely beautiful, and I think that the progressions made in these character arcs are going to go back on themselves after the developments of what Jinx did. And that is so emotional and so sad a concept to me. Now, I don't think that the possibility of this being undone and them changing their trajectory and their decisions potentially as a result of this, I don't think that renders what they went through to come to this point void. It's still additive to their character, it still speaks of who they are, and it's no less admirable if they go back on it, I think, because something's going to force their hand here to an extent of nothing they've seen yet, I think. But yeah, what a partnership. Viktor and Jayce, two first-class amazing characters. I love everything they brought to Arcane. I haven't said much, but I see bits and pieces of parallels between Jayce and Viktor's relationship and, this way they're kindred spirits and share ideals and diverge in certain ways. Now they've come back, but they could diverge again. I see parallels between that and what we see of the brothers of Vander and Silco. I'll get into Silco parallels with tons of other characters in a bit, but just to delve into it a little bit, I described the way that Viktor and Silco had this unerring belief in themselves that could be a double-edged sword. It could be very beneficial, but it could also be dark. I think that common denominator between them shows us of a bit of a parallel between them. They both come from the Undercity, of course. They both have this ambition. It goes in different directions, but we have been shown evidence that for Viktor it can get very dark. And then, on the other hand, we have Jayce and Vander. Jayce, who in this episode, a parallel with Vander, is that he decided that a truce was best and most equitable for both sides and best for the world going forward, or best for society going forward. Big parallel between him and Vander there. And notably, he refers to Viktor as his brother, similar to how Silco and Vander refer to each other as brothers. We know what happened with Vander and Silco. Could a potentially similar thing happen between Jayce and Viktor? I could see it heading that way. We won't know for sure though, but definitely a thought. So potential fallout from this, they haven't lost sight of themselves, but this could cause that to happen maybe, to force their hand. Maybe this was the last time they ever acted as partners. I for sure hope not. That might be a bit too drastic, and I hope it is too drastic. But there are tons of possibilities for where this could go. And again, I don't think they destroyed the Hextech core, so that is always looming in the background. And just a couple of things to add on that I forgot to mention. Interesting that the boy that Jayce killed ended up being the son of Rennie, I believe her name was, one of the counselors for Zahn. So again, you can see the long-reaching ramifications and domino effects of singular acts and how far they can go. So interesting that ended up being her son, and quite tragic that her son was put in those circumstances. And also just a tidbit, there is a image of Singed in this episode. As there's a sort of montage going on during that emotional last segment, we see lots of the characters that we've come to know and love, and then we see Singed, and he's grasping a locket. He seems to be clasping a locket, and it's hard to actually see what's in there, but it looks to be a little girl. I remember a very distinct line that he said to Silco in episode 8 when he was going in and out of delirium because of Jinx's physical state. He said that he has a daughter. He too once had a daughter. And he's clasping this locket of what looks like a little girl. That seems to be a connection there, an allusion to perhaps why he is the way he is. There's a potential that I see two ideas just sprang into mind. I'm just spitballing here, so bear with me. One of the ideas I got immediately was that his daughter was maybe terminally ill, badly ill, for some reason injured maybe, and science and technology was not enough to save her. And so because of that, he went on this huge crusade to continue to let the mutations survive and continue to progress science because it failed him in the first place and failed his daughter. That's a sort of thing that came into my mind immediately. Also, it could be that potentially maybe his experiments killed his daughter, and so in a sort of repulsive response, he decided to just continue going along with what he was doing because there's no taking back what he's done, something like that. I don't know, those are just the two things that came into my mind. But then also there's a scene of him looking up at what looks like a man's body on his ceiling. No idea what that is. I think that might be an Easter egg for League of Legends fans that I'm not aware of, but I have no idea what that is. Oh, one more detail to add about that little montage. We see Mrs. Medarda looking at Mel's painting of her hometown, of her homeland, that she has ruined. She's splashed other paint on it, again, symbolizing her choice of heart over family, as if her taking off the ring wasn't enough, right? But that was interesting too. We also see Ekko and Heimerdinger swapping stories or talking about something to do with the technology. now we get to our final two characters. Just to state this outright, the direction for this final 10 minutes or 8-10 minutes, whatever it was, this final confrontation, this twisted, macabre feast that Jinx sets up with all of this, and then the resulting death of Silco leading to her firing the weapon at the council room, all of that was so beautifully directed. The music that played, named after the title of this episode, The Monster You Created. I am the monster that you created, were the lyrics. I think bluntly alluding to Jinx now. That's clearly about Jinx. And I think referring to Vi a bit more than Silco. We'll get into that. But both of them, Vi a bit more. But it was just beautiful. The tension slowly kept ramping up. The red moon, the blood moon, indicative of poor fortune. That's what that moon is symbolic of in all sorts of fiction. Very appropriate. The song used was very sobering, and things kept ramping up and up and up until Jinx shot that thing, and they showed that montage, and the emotions just overcame me. I couldn't contain myself. I was so affected by that. But yeah, I just wanted to draw attention to the direction, particularly of that scene. Audio, the visuals were beautiful, and as well, audio, the song was beautiful. The approach was so emotional and so sobering and so great. It was almost like a funeral or a lament, and the visuals were stunning. But Jinx. So Jinx here seems to be overpowered by the shimmer that's been injected into her. I don't know for sure if that has had an overt effect on her mentality. I think it's having some sort of effect. I don't know if it's hugely significant, because the things she experienced here were not totally different from what she experienced prior, but maybe it could have elevated the intensity of that because they were elevated here. I just don't know if that's because of the dramatic circumstances being the most emotion she's felt ever, maybe, and her just spiraling and fragmenting as the result of that, or if that's because of the shimmer, or maybe both, not sure. But it definitely had an effect on her physically. She has some sort of superhuman reflexes now, and so that's interesting, and it doesn't bode well for anyone she views as her enemy. But so, in this episode, she seems to take it upon herself to confront the idea of her sense of self, of who she is, of who she wants to be going forward, of who has her best interests at heart, of the people that are most important in her life, and just what to do. She seems to have that at the forefront of her mind. She kidnaps Silco after hearing him struggle and talking to the Vander statue, and tragically not knowing that his struggle is because he is going to pick her, and feels grief over the death of his dream, not grief over handing her over. But she misunderstands that and takes him in, and misinterprets that as him being a representation of another betrayal at this point in her life, which is just a sad, very sad circumstance for her and for Silco. She then kidnaps Vi, and takes her to this feast, and she says some very interesting things to her. She says to her that the reason she became Jinx, she's self-aware of the division between Jinx and Powder. The reason she became Jinx was not because of Silco, it was because of her. It was because of her decision to leave her in that moment and her inability to come back to her. And she makes note that she doesn't blame her entirely for that. She blames a lot of the taunting voices of this cruel Vi in her head that had been tearing at her insecurities and all that. But nonetheless, she says that Vi is the primary cause of this. Do I agree with this? Sort of, because she wouldn't have said, my sister's gone, my sister's dead to me, all that time ago in episode 3, if Vi had not embraced her. Now again, Vi was a teenage girl. So much pressure was hoisted upon her in that moment. She had lost her father, she had lost her friends, she had seen so much tragedy, and she was overcome by grief and rage and anger and all sorts of very human things. You can't say that she's a horrible person for hitting Powder there. You can't say she's a horrible person for needing a moment. It's just, how do you expect a young girl to react in that situation? However, it cannot be denied that she had played a big part in Powder's transformation. If she had not hit her, if she had not left her there, that wouldn't have left a gap for Silco to come and swoop in. Maybe she would have gathered Powder and they would have left on their own, something like that, and there would have been wounds, deep, deep wounds, but I think that there wouldn't have been as drastic a change as there was, and maybe Jinx would not have surfaced. But reality occurred. Vi did leave her, Silco did come in. So the ensuing act was not Silco embracing her, because Silco embraced her because of Vi abandoning her. Vi left that gap there. But I think that Jinx, while Vi was the primary cause through her logic, and I understand that, I don't think that Jinx would have come about as distinctly as she did, as powerfully as she did, this Jinx character, this Jinx part of who Powder is, without Silco. He gave her all sorts of freedom. He tried to allow her to express herself in a very classically father-esque way. He wasn't hard on her. He tried to let her find herself in this world, try to find the way she wanted to live life. He said she was beautiful. He wanted her to not experience any pain. So he promoted Jinx. So I think that he has nearly as much of a factor in this as Vi and the illusions of Vi did. So a bit of a kind of a disagreement with what Jinx said there, but I understand where she's coming from for sure. And so she has Vi tied up, and she has Silco tied up, and the ghosts of Milo, Clagger, and that bunny. The one that Vi lost in the first place, then gave to Powder, this representation of this dream, this hope for prosperity and childhood wonder, and hope for a better future and peace and a life to live. The one that, after given to Powder, she then kept as Jinx, and still has. She placed it at the table, right by, I think, the Powder chair. So I think it's a representation here of that old dream, that old life, everything that Vi wanted to show her, and then everything that Jinx, I think, acknowledges that she wanted to show her. But in the end, she spurns it. She spurns it for the seat of Jinx. And so I think her rejecting it here might be a goodbye to this bunny, a goodbye to the old life. Whether or not it remains in the stories will be a big indicator of whether or not Powder is dead completely. Or maybe it's just gone now after she spurns it. But I think the fact that it's at the table at all, I think that this nails home the point that it's been a pretty important symbol throughout the whole story. And then she brings Caitlyn forward. And so Jinx offers Vi a choice here. Caitlyn, the core of all her insecurities and jealousy and all of these things, the core of her feeling abandoned by Vi in the same way that Silco felt abandoned by Vander. She wants her gone, understandably. That's been clear from the beginning. But she wants Vi to do it as a demonstration of saying, I don't care for her, I care for you. You are all that I care about in this moment. You are my sister, you are the only thing I care about in this world, or the main thing I care about in this world. She wants Vi to prove it. And the way she said this is very, I think, key. She said, not kill her, not show me you love me more, or whatever. She said, make her go away. Make her go away. That's such a childish, that's something a kid would say to their parents about someone they don't like. And so it just makes me feel so sad. This is still, deep inside, there's still this little girl who just wants to be loved and is just struggling through all this trauma to reach out for this affection. Make her go away because she is stealing you from me and I just want to be loved. Jinx has done tons of heinous and terrible things, but it's impossible not to feel sympathy for this. Make her go away. She says that to her sister. She begs her sister to do it. But it's a cruel thing she's asking. Vi cares about Caitlyn. Vi is never going to kill Caitlyn. That doesn't mean that Vi loves Caitlyn more than she loves Jinx. That doesn't even mean that Vi loves Caitlyn. She cares for her. I don't even know if she loves her. But it's such the scales are not balanced. Her choosing not to kill someone she cares for does not mean that she's choosing her over Jinx. She just doesn't want to become a murderer of someone she likes, someone she cares for, someone who understands her. So it's a very unreasonable thing that Jinx is asking of her here, as you'd expect with her mind so fragmented and her not thinking straight here. But I just want to stress that Vi choosing not to kill Caitlyn does not mean that she likes Caitlyn more or anything like that. She just doesn't want to kill Caitlyn. If she was given a decision, much more direct decision, a much more direct parallel, a scenario of either Jinx/Powder dies or Caitlyn dies, I think she would have picked Powder for sure. But this isn't direct. Powder's life is not at risk here if she doesn't choose Caitlyn. It's not equal. It's not equivalent. So she doesn't want Caitlyn to die. She doesn't want that to happen. And she thinks that she can convince Jinx that she will trust her, she will love her, they'll talk things out. If she comes with her, things will be all right. But that hesitation is enough of an answer for Jinx, because the choice she gives to Vi here is directly reflective of the choice that she's going to make. She says, I'm aware. I am Jinx and I am Powder. and I will make the choice here depending on what you do. If you do as I ask and kill Caitlyn, I will be Powder, things will go back to normal. If you don't, I will be Jinx. And she says those things, but again, I don't completely trust that that's the way things will be. She is very far down this line. She is so broken. She is completely different from the girl she was half a life ago, what seems like 10 lifetimes ago. Her killing Caitlyn would not lead to Powder coming back in the way she was. She would be so much more dependent. She would still be twisted. That wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't be the way it was before at all. It would be just even more pathologically bad for her psychology. And not to mention, it would be horrible for Vi. She'd lose a dear person to her. She's just putting up a front here, trying to make Vi choose her. She's saying whatever she can just to make Vi choose her. Again, very sad. You see that little girl there, saying whatever she can to have her sister take her side. Again, so childish, so innocent, which is totally ironic. But Vi's indecision here makes her feel very invalidated, feel very insecure, like her insecurities have been validated, in the sense that she's not picking me, she must not care about me, she must be ashamed of what I am. There's no going back. All those thoughts start coming up again, taunted by the voices again. She doesn't initially think a lot of these things, but the voices make her kind of go in that direction. And then Vi tries to bring her back, and Jinx is a little receptive to it. She's kind of listening, and she's going, Powder, we'll work this out, Powder. And then Jinx says, what do you have to say about this to Silco? And the first words out of Silco's mouth, the first words he's been able to utter to this person that kidnapped him, who brought him here, who's forcing him to do all these things, who isn't being trusted, is her name is Jinx. You know, he latches on to Jinx for a couple of selfish reasons, but so much of it is in pure care for who she is, for pure care of his daughter. And the first thing out of his mouth here is an affirmation of Jinx, of who she is. He sees Jinx as the most beautiful version of who Jinx is at this point. So he's not trying to turn her. He's not trying to make her feel any pain. He's not trying to bring her to his side because of purely his own needs. He's doing this because he thinks that this is her, and he thinks she's beautiful, and that turning her away from that is not validating the person she is right now, and he wants her to feel confident and comfortable with who she is, because she hasn't been that up until now. It's a validation of who she is. I'll talk about Silco later, but I just had to bring about that moment. The first things out of his mouth after being kidnapped by his daughter is not criticizing her for doing that, is not saying, why did you do this to me? It's in support of who she is, of who he views her to be. Her name is not Powder, her name is Jinx. Get it right. You are talking about someone who is far in the past. This is her now, so say it right. And in a dark, twisted, pathological way that is touching. He says, Vi will not accept you. She'll abandon you once she realizes that you're not the Powder she knew. And that isn't the truth. I don't think Vi would ever do that, as I talked about before. But you understand completely why he thinks that. And you understand why he says that, because he doesn't want her to go to Vi. Because he's put so much into his attachment to her. He doesn't want her to leave him. Again, he has his own abandonment issues. And this back and forth is just too much for her. It's just, she can't have a second to think. Jinx, I mean. And so she's been torn apart both sides. Her mind is just fracturing even more. Her mind is just fracturing even more. And then Vi makes a mistake. Before then, Silco reaffirms his love for her. He says, I love you. You are my daughter. You are beautiful. You are perfect as you are. And I would never have given you up for my dream. Telling completely the truth. Then there's a bit of reflection there. Caitlyn then becomes free because of the broken wine glass. She threatens Jinx. Jinx then whimpers a little bit, plays innocent, and then uses her supernatural abilities from the Shimmer to knock Caitlyn out. Then there's a bit of a tug of war here, and Vi makes her mistake. Again, I don't blame her for this mistake, but she makes a mistake regardless with regards to Jinx's psychology. She's reminding her of all the people that used to care for them, all the people she used to love, all the people that knew her, and saying, remember who you are, remember our past life, remember who you were, you are still that person. And then she begins listing off the names of all the people they knew, and that is not good, because she names Milo Clagger Vander herself, and all that Jinx can think of when she's doing that is the visions of the warped memories of these people that criticize her and her guilt and grief that she caused their deaths, and it just causes her to fragment and shatter even more. And Silco, who knows her better than Vi does at this point in time, who knows her better than anyone, saying, stop, shut up, stop saying this, stop it, because it's causing her such pain. He doesn't want to see his daughter in pain. So he points the gun at Vi to kill her. He eventually breaks through, he points the gun at Vi to kill her, to get her to shut up. Also, I'm sure there's many other reasons behind his want to kill her, but in this moment, that's the primary reason. Shut the hell up. You're causing her so much pain. And Jinx, her instinct, the powder in her, seeping through, sees that threat towards her sister and instinctually shoots him to save Vi's life. Everything he was doing was for her well-being. And she shot him, and she immediately regrets what she did. Immediately. It's like, those situations where you're deciding between two things, and you don't know what you want, and you've got a kind of tug of war, but then the prospect of one of the two being taken away from you rears its head, and then you make up your mind and you knew what you wanted to do in the first place, despite it being a close choice. You knew there was only ever one choice. I think that's how Jinx feels in this moment. Now that Silco is dying, she sees that there was only ever one answer, that he loved her, that he had her best interests at heart, that he wouldn't have betrayed her, and that being by his side was what she should have been doing. I think that is what clocks in her head. You don't know what you have until it's gone, right? The funny thing is with that is if it had gone the other way and Vi had been hurt, I could just as easily see her feeling that way about Vi. But the events that transpired, and that is what she thought about this whole situation. And her father, his last words to her are that she's beautiful, that she should embrace herself the way she is. She knows that means Jinx, and so, with that in mind, with that advice in mind, she takes a seat at the Jinx chair, being a legacy of her father, carrying out the will he imparted upon her, carrying out his spirit, and loving the version of herself that he loved, and embracing it, choosing Jinx. That is Jinx's choice. And hand in hand with that choice is her taking that weapon and shooting it, that thing powered by Hextech, the Hex gemstone, and shooting it towards the Council, a declaration of war. So now the question with Jinx is, there's been that concept throughout the whole post-time skip story of Arcane. Ekko mentioned it, Vi mentioned it, Silco has been dwelling on this a lot. This idea of, is Powder still in there? You have to kill Powder. No, Powder's still in there. She's still my sister. No, she's completely changed. That whole idea. So I wonder after this, is Powder dead? Is Powder truly dead now that she has taken up the mantle of Jinx? On one hand, I could see her being completely dead. As I alluded to much earlier in this discussion, she could be completely dead. And I could totally see that happening. But it takes a lot to completely bury that side of her. It is so deeply ingrained in her that I don't think it's easy to say with certainty that she's definitely dead and that Vi can never get through to her at all, that there isn't a part of her that says that cares about Vi, that Powder is gone. I don't think I can say with a certainty that Powder is gone until we see much more of what Jinx is like post Silco's death, because she was grieving for him, she was crying for him, and then her eyes completely glaze over. Like a new form of conviction, like a new Jinx was born, almost. And so that says to me that could represent a death of Powder, but I'm not sure. I need more of a confirmation before concluding that, because these psychological issues are so deeply rooted and so fragmented. There's so many moving pieces in her mind. We can't know for sure at this point, but there is evidence for the idea that she is gone, that Powder could be gone, and that's extremely sad. Twisted and somewhat ironic that Powder died with Silco, if that is the case. Also, I love the little touch of the way the bazooka thing, I'm sorry, I don't know what the weapon is actually called, there might be a name for it in League of Legends lore, I'm not sure, but the way the bazooka, when it hit the window of the council room, the way the mirror, the window shattered, complete reflection of Jinx looking in the mirror, I think in episode 7 when she's tending to her wounds, complete reflection of that. So that was just a cool visual touch, a visual reflection. And so I just want to talk a little bit about what that means symbolically, her shooting this bazooka thing, this weapon, at the council room. Because there are layers to this. It isn't just a cliffhanger for the hell of it. It is very symbolic. It is symbolic of Heimerdinger's initial hesitancy about pursuing Hextech, because that thing is powered by a Hextech gemstone. There is a gemstone in there. The gemstone that was stolen by Jinx. Heimerdinger said that this in the wrong hands was bad. You can't release this to the public because people will go haywire with it. Things will go out of control. He feared that in the wrong hands, this could lead to people causing mayhem and war and destruction. That is exactly what Jinx causes. So this is literally the gemstone they created, the gemstone that they were desperate to get out into the public to progress things, coming back to bite them. There are people in the Undercity, people like Jinx, who have complete and total malice and hate and just, they despise anything to do with people in Piltover. So are you going to let this go out in the streets where it's possible to go into those sorts of hands, or it can come back and bite you like this destructive force? This is what Heimerdinger was warning them about. And so while Jayce and Viktor made the right decision for them, made the decision that's true to themselves, it was too late. So they made this choice and they strayed back to what they believe was right. But the damage had been done in the sense that the gemstone was already out there in the hands of someone very, very dangerous. Someone who has complete malice for the council, for everything that Piltover stands for, who then carried out that with her shot from that bazooka, from that rocket launcher. So this is representative of Heimerdinger's point. He was right in that way. He was short-sighted in some ways, he missed the forest for the trees in others. You could see what they were talking about, but he was right in that this thing in the hands of others, of those who would be called adversaries of their enemies, is extremely dangerous, and it's going to cause a lot of pain and suffering. One thing that I think needs to be said here to quickly clarify something is that I am not ignorant of the fact that Heimerdinger, who has ruled Piltover for decades upon decades, maybe a couple hundred years, however long it's been, is the one who, under his rule, led things to grow into disrepair in the Undercity. A lot of this festered while he was a prominent seat on the council. Now, I'm not saying it's entirely his fault, because all the blame for this can't rest on the shoulders of one person. It's the slow addition of this sort of ignorance and oppression and all these sorts of negative things over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years that leads to this difference, to this contrast in the hierarchies and the societies. So I'm not blaming it all on him, but I do think it's important to point out that a lot of the disrepair that is coming back to bite them in the form of this gemstone-fueled weapon, a lot of it is due to the disrepair that festered underneath his rule. So just wanted to mention that, because I know there are lots of strong feelings about Heimerdinger both ways. I think he's a very nuanced character, and it's important to talk about the things that he was right about and the things that he was short-sighted about and maybe ignorant about, because I think ignoring either side is ignoring a lot of the subtle beauty of his character. So just wanted to say that quickly. So it's kind of poetic that Jayce's proposal to Silco about we will have peace if you hand over Jinx, the proposal that Silco was never going to agree to despite it being in the best interest of his dream, despite it being kind of what he dreamed about all this time, the proposal was going to be met with a refusal, ultimately. And that refusal is carried out very literally with Jinx's rocket launcher using the Hextech gemstone that he crafted against him. It's almost poetic in a twisted, very dark way. And so that's once again another reason why it was never going to be that easy. Peace was never going to be this easy, and that's why that smile on his face is so haunting. It is haunting because it sees a world that is far more simple, even still, even experienced. It envisions a world that is far more simple than it actually is, far less dark than it actually is. And that world is beautiful, a world where they can have this prosperity, but that just isn't reality. It was never going to work. Silco was not going to agree with that. And there were too many chaos factors, Jinx being one of them. So this means war, essentially. This very literally cuts their vote short. This very literally signals a war between Zaun and Piltover. And in that sense, the original sentiment of what Silco wanted is carried out. And he didn't even have to give up Jinx. He just had to die. This story's so messed up in some ways. Anyways, I need to now get to Silco. I've been tiptoeing around him. He is the star of this episode. And we have to say goodbye to an amazing, amazing villain. He was, from the beginning to the end, phenomenal character. Great demonstration of the reaction that can be brought about in response to this sort of oppression taken to this darkest extreme, but also that combined with abandonment issues and just wanting to be connected to someone intimately and how that is brought about with regards to this daughter. And in this episode, I saw so many parallels with him and other characters, some of which I mentioned already, but I'm going to get into them. So of course, his first scene in the episode starts with him looking at the Shimmer heist that went on and the damage done from that, and, talking to Rennie about her boy and all that, and then the Sevika scene where she defended him and all that. By the way, the last shot of Sevika during that montage I described before was very sad because, loyal to the end, she goes back after having been beat up by Vi, smokes a cigar, and just sits on the couch in Silco's office waiting for her leader, the man she just gave a complete show of loyalty to, and the man that will never return. She's waiting for a man that will never return there, loyal to the absolute end. And that's a very melancholic shot there. Jayce proposes him the deal, like I said, and Silco is astute, as I said. But he gives Jayce credit. He gives him respect for trying to do the right thing here. He says that, you're showing your hand, blah, 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 you're inexperienced, and then he says, maybe I underestimated you, or something along those lines, after he sees what he's proposing, because in the back of his mind, he knew. He's been saying all this time that Piltover was gaining momentum, they were always ahead of them. If a war were to happen between them, he knows that they were going to lose. So he knows that Jayce is right, and he gives him credit for realizing this and wanting to do the right thing. I think he respects that a great deal, but at the same time, as soon as Jinx entered the equation, I said this in the reaction, he was never going to give her up for anything in the world. Anything in the world. He never wanted to leave her. He never wanted her to leave him. She was his everything. She was more than his dream. She was more than anything else. So that was never a choice. Once that became a demand, he was never going to accept that, and there was never going to be this sort of peace. But I've mentioned parallels between Jayce and Silco before. I saw a couple more here. They're both leaders of their respective nations, the nation of Zaun and the city of Piltover. They've both kind of become that way after ousting the old one, Vander and Heimerdinger, and rose into prominence. And they both realize that they're respectively in over their heads in various ways because of their focus on these sorts of things. Silco's focused on Jinx, and he lets that distract him from his dream. And Jayce is focused on his dream, but gets distracted by all these other things, and is not able to enact his dream in the way he wants. Then again, Silco I don't think minds too much about having to do any of that, as long as Jinx is well and alive and this beautiful person and safe. But I talked in my previous discussion in episode 8 how the parallels between Vander and Silco, which I'll talk about a bit more in a second, but how both of them have had to steel themselves, how both of them have had to learn to be more pragmatic and less reckless, and that is something that Jayce learned exactly. Jayce had to learn that himself as he maneuvered these things at the top of the political hierarchy. Silco had to learn that as well. They can't just charge forward with regards to their dreams to achieve what they want to achieve. And so these are two men with very distinct focuses in their lives who have had to learn to navigate these things in ways that they don't necessarily want to, but have to, because this is the world they live in. So interesting parallels there. I'm sure there's more if I were to think about them, but that's just what came to mind immediately. They both have to be careful. They both have to maneuver carefully. And at the end of the day, I don't think that either wants a war because of the destruction that would occur. But nevertheless, Silco would have chosen war. In the agreement that Jayce and Silco broker prior to Jayce bringing up Jinx, I find it interesting that Jayce says you'll stop the production of Shimmer, and Silco agrees. He says we're already half there, assuming after the attacks that Jayce helped lead to his Shimmer stores, and he agrees to that. I think that the only way that could work, in tandem with what I said in the episode 8 discussion about the importance of Shimmer to Zaunian society and economics and everything. And so I think that the only world in which they agree to ramping down the production of Shimmer and completely stopping it is where these people and society as a whole for the Undercity is compensated for this in some way. And blanket amnesty, sovereignty for the nations, more or less equality, pretty much, would be the best way to compensate for that. So this was a way forward for Zaunian society, for Zaun, without Shimmer. This was one of the potential avenues without it that I kind of discussed in that discussion. Now, of course, this was before Jinx was added to the equation in terms of the deal, in terms of what she did, everything. So I think we can forget about that. And it'll be interesting to see what happens to Shimmer in general in Season 2 and how the Undercity reacts to Silco being gone. Will Shimmer production continue with Singed? I'm not sure. All the stuff to do with Shimmer and its relation to the Undercity, I'm really interested in seeing where that part goes, where that sort of subplot goes. So just wanted to make note of that because I do think it's important and interesting. Another quick parallel I noticed during this episode in the reaction, you'll see that I said it, was parallels between Silco and Heimerdinger. Both are viewed by their underlings, so to speak, throughout the series at differing points in the story as a relic of times gone by, that the world has passed them by, that they're not useful for progress of their respective cities anymore. They both were usurped by people within their own faction. They both were betrayed to an extent, although the attempts at Silco's life did not work out, so not direct, but I think the core of that is a parallel. And since we're on the topic of parallels, I also want to bring up another parallel between Viktor and Silco. Again, I've mentioned this earlier in the episode, earlier in the discussion, that they have this parallel about their one-minded ambition and dreams and all that, and this conviction to achieve what one desires in this world no matter what. They both have that drive. They're both from the underground, all that. I mentioned this before, I'm not going to repeat it. Just keep that in the back of your mind because I'm going to return to it in 2 minutes. But I just want to say that, once again, like I said in the episode, he was never going to give Jinx up. Silco was someone who was defined by this dream for opportunity and respect for him and his people his entire life, and then was urged forward even further towards that after that experience in the water and with Vander and that betrayal and that abandonment, which left a scar on him in multiple ways. It accentuated his fear of abandonment, and it propelled him forward to gain the conviction to continue to take his dream in that direction. So this possessed and defined Silco, this dream. This became who he was. Of course, there are other layers to him, other complexities, nuances, and human elements. He's a very human person. I don't mean to say that he's an ideologue or one-minded or shallow. Far from it. But he was possessed by this dream until he met Jinx. Then he latched on completely to her. It was a gradual thing because he was balancing both sorts of things. But by the end, there was no question in his mind that he was never going to give her up. He was never going to do it. At different points in his life, he latches on to these dreams. He has two. He has his dream of the nation of Zon, and then he has his dream for his daughter and her well-being and everything to do with her, this beautiful person. And so like Jinx, Silco is someone who has to latch on to these things and sort of has to pour himself into them because he's been so deprived of these things earlier on in his life, and that's just the way he can function. He has everything. He has so many things weighing on him. He has been starving from human connection, I assume, a great deal of his life because of his path. So he is defined by these things. He's defined by these things that he pours his heart into. So are a lot of characters in this story, but so is Viktor. Viktor poured his everything into this innovation, into this hextech, into this increased discovery. And that is dangerous because pouring yourself into this, when confronted with the idea of losing all that, you can make some drastic decisions. When confronted with these choices, you can, go dark, for lack of a better term. And we saw a glimpse of what a dark Viktor would look like. It was him barreling forward after his leg having been healed and using hextech recklessly and then leading to Sky dying. That was a glimpse of the dark side of Viktor potentially being possessed by these sorts of things and barreling forward in that way. He was going completely all in on hextech, and I imagine that if he had completely healed himself and all that, he would have reached maybe a point of no return where he could have continued down that path and just kept going and exponentially ramping things up because of the resolve for this dream that he has in the similar way that Silco has. In that way, this choice between, do I continue with hextech despite what tragedy it's brought? Do I continue trying to heal myself? Do I save my own life in service of this innovation? Or do I do what I believe is right? That choice that he had to make is very similar, metaphorically and symbolically, to the choice that Silco made under the water while he was being drowned. I've talked about it before many times. There is that comfort of the water as it lulls you in, as it says, rest on your laurels. You don't have to fight. You don't have to barrel forward. Just be comfortable. And then there's the temptation to keep fighting and use your conviction to go even further in that direction, to double down. Silco chose to double down. Viktor chose not to double down. He chose to go with his heart and go back on it. While Silco saw this divergence in life and saw the only option to be continuing forward, Viktor went back on it. Same thing with Jayce. That same illusion can be used to his choice between going forward in that facility or going back and saying enough is enough. So there's that parallel there, where Silco sees the chance to keep going forward. Jayce, and particularly Viktor, see it as a chance to dial back and right their wrongs as best they can, and realize that they've been going too far. So a nice little comparison you can make there between the choice he had to make in that water and the choice that Viktor made. Now, Viktor chose what in Silco's eyes would be the safe choice, but I'm not criticizing that. I've just spent so many minutes talking about how admirable that was. So accepting the comforts of this stagnation in Silco's eyes is not the same thing as Viktor saying, you know what, enough is enough. I'm just saying the dynamics of that choice is very similar, and their divergence is very interesting. It tells you a lot about the type of people they are. But anyways, we go back to this choice he has to make, that there's only ever one choice for him, but it causes him great anguish because he still cares about his dream. While there's only ever one choice, this is his life's work that he gives up on here. Another parallel to Jayce and Viktor, right? In service of his daughter. In service of Jinx. And he agonizes over it, and he's like, this is what I've wanted all my life, and now that I'm here, I can't do it. There's no way. Is there anything as undoing as a daughter? He says to Vander's statue. It's a beautiful scene. I love that scene because it shows that he still has love for the man who was his brother. They hurt each other, he hurt him, he literally killed him. And that can't be taken away and that can't be ignored. Silco still has immense love for him, though. For the relationship they had, for the man he was. He respected him. He didn't respect what he ended up doing, but he still loved him. He can't ignore that irrational love. Bit of a parallel with Medarda, Mel Medarda. And I talked again in episode 8 discussion about their parallels and how he's become more like Vander as time has gone on. I said he's taken some of Vander's characteristics in the last discussion. He's dialed back. He's had to be more pragmatic. He's had to think more before doing these actions. He's had to not think with his heart and think more with his head as these things have gone on. And he speaks to the ghost of Vander and he offers him a drink. And he laments that he can't enact their dream because of his love. The same way Vander can't do what his dream initially was because of his love for the people, Silco's doing the exact same thing. Giving up on what they wanted to do as young idealistic men with these dreams of a violent revolution and realizing that the world is not that simple and you can't do that. Now, of course, Vander did it because doing so would break the status quo, hurt all of the ones he loves, and lead to destruction of the Undercity. Silco does it because it directly results in him losing his daughter. But the sentiment is the same. And just one more thing to add in terms of Silco-Vander parallels that I didn't mention before is that one thing that's very directly a parallel between the two, aside from the wealth of things I already mentioned in episode 8's discussion and sort of in this one as well, is that they both had the same choice. Vander was given the choice, surrender these 4 kids, the people who had committed the heist, and then everything will be fine. The Undercity won't be harassed by enforcers, and everything will be okay. He was completely unwilling to do that. That was never an option for him. Same deal with Silco. He's being given the exact same thing. Give up Jinx, give up your loved one, give up your daughter, and you can have everything you ever dreamed of, to a greater extent than Vander. For Vander, it was just, we're going to stop harassing you. For Silco, it's, if you give her to us, and along with the other agreements, you will have everything you ever wanted for Zon. But just like his brother, he's completely unwilling to do that. It's a hard decision because it's everything that he ever wanted. But in a similar theme with this episode, the choice made by Jayce, the choice made by Viktor, by Mel, these are difficult decisions, but that doesn't mean that it isn't clear to them what they have to choose. In this scenario, it being a difficult decision means it's hard for them to turn it down, but there is no other option for them. Eventually, for these people, it becomes clear what they must do. Not that it was 50-50. And so yeah, in this choice that Silco's being given, Vander is someone he can directly relate to, but he has no... The tragic irony of this is that he has no one to confide in with this, no one who's experienced what he's experienced, and the one who would be able to understand his plight here in multiple ways, not just this, all the other things I mentioned before, he's dead, and he's the one who delivered the final blow. This story is so full circle in so many ways, it's unbelievable. He's finally given a chance to do exactly what he wants. Sovereignty for his city, equality, opportunity, and more than anything else, respect. Jayce offers him respect here. It's what he wanted all this time, and he chooses not to because he cannot give up on his daughter. Even after she kidnaps him, even after she does this, even after she says in front of him, I will give up on him, I will not be with him anymore, to Vi, if you choose to kill Caitlyn. If you kill Caitlyn, I will abandon him. He literally hears the daughter that he would give up everything for saying that she will abandon him at the drop of a hat, and yet he doesn't judge her for it, he doesn't criticize her for it, he sees how broken she is, he sees what she's thinking, he understands her better than anyone else, and he doesn't reprimand her for it. He understands her. He loves her, and he holds no ill will. He doesn't believe that he's turned her away or changed her through what he's done and promoting Jinx. He just believes that he's unearthed who she truly was all this time, who she was meant to be, and that person is beautiful to him. It's a beautiful person. He sees himself in her, but she's also by far her own person in his eyes, and that person is someone he loves. She is perfect. His first words to her after she takes off his first words to her after she takes off his gag is, her name is Jinx. Call her by her name. Self-validation. Telling her that she has nothing to be ashamed about because this is her and she is perfect. I'm sorry I keep repeating that she is perfect line, but it just sticks out so much to me. It means so much. He wasn't even mad at her about what she did. He was completely understanding. He forgives her for kidnapping him and doing all of that and saying she'll abandon him. He forgives her for having shot him. And that just says so much about him. She is his undoing. She is his kryptonite. Silco's done terrible, terrible things throughout. He's not a good person at all. You don't condone the things that he's done terrible things. But in his own way, he's still sympathetic. In his own way, he's still understandable and layered, and such a deep and complex character. Possessed by a dream, just like Jayce, just like Viktor. Unwilling to live in the shadows, just like Vi. Enraptured by a dream, and then enraptured by his love for a person which overpowered that dream. He's a person who's defined by his broken psychology, broken mentality, the way he needed to pour himself into these people, to so deeply love them. And you think that he grew past being burned by Vander. He had his eyes on this new dream, this new conviction. But ultimately, he can't ignore a love of similar strength when it's thrust right in his face. And in the end, he's been betrayed in a way by the two most important people in his life. So while he's done terrible things, you can't say that it doesn't inspire sympathy. It does in me, at least. I can't think of him coldly. I can't hate him. I can't dislike him, despite him being not a good person. But maybe betrayed isn't the right word. He saw his interaction with Vander as being betrayed, but I don't think what he saw Jinx did as a betrayal. He saw how broken her mind was. He immediately clocked that emotional understanding of this person that no one in the world, not Vi, not Vander, no one else, could even have hope to have understood her in that moment better than he did. He saw that bringing up those names, as Vi did, Ekko, Milo, Clagger, Vander, that was only going to cause her harm and pain, and so he told her to shut up. That is so indicative of him being the person who best understands Jinx, who she is at this point in time. Vi understood her best at that earlier part in her life. Silco is the one for her now, but he's gone now. Burned by the brother he loved, burned by the daughter he loved, unable to carry out his dream because of that daughter. It's just misery upon misery. He was never able to enact anything that he wanted to do, but in the end, I don't see regret in his eyes. I see him being thankful for having come to know Jinx, for having seen her on that rainy, stormy, fire-filled night at the end of episode 3. And I think more than anything, he's filled with gratitude for having met her, for having been given the opportunity to love her. That's how much he adores her. It's beyond words. The fact that all he had to say to her, in response to her looking like she was about to cry, like she was in pain, was, "Don't cry. You're perfect. You can do this. You can take on the world, however you feel that may have to come about. You can do it." That is a lot. And it ultimately leads to his daughter taking her seat as his successor, carrying on the spirit of Silco as she takes her seat as Jinx, very much as Vi is carrying forward the spirit of Vander. These sisters carrying forward the wills of their fathers. How will that develop? Who knows? But both have tons to learn about themselves even still, even as Jinx made this decision, even as Vi saw her make this decision and will no doubt change because of this. I can't wait to see where things go from here. There will be more pain, there will be more anguish, but I'm here for all of it because it's amazing storytelling. And so I think that's everything I've got to say. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that this episode was so long, but I really wanted to talk about every character at length, and I feel like I'm proud of the way I did it. This reaction series, me checking out Arcane, was a resounding success. I couldn't have imagined that I would have enjoyed this as much as I did, both the reactions and having watched Arcane. So as I said in the beginning, before the reaction, thank you so much for offering me this opportunity to share my experience with you. Thanks very much to all the patrons who pledged, who are interested in paying to see more of this, who are interested in my thoughts. It means so much to me. Thank you very much. I do plan to give a little bit of a summed up review of Arcane in just a minute, but I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping about future reactions. So this was very special to me. I don't want to just become a reaction channel. I don't want to do reactions about 5 shows at a time, 10 shows at a time, whatever it is that a lot of reaction channels do. And I'm not criticizing those reaction channels at all, but that just isn't my approach. I don't want to do that. I want each reaction to be very special for obvious reasons. I want reactions to be sort of like an event in my life, rather than something I do every day as a job. I would like it to become a part of my job. That would be very cool. But I want them to at the same time be something very special, something that I look forward to very deeply every time I do them, and that don't become a saturated part of my life. I don't want to lean too much on them or anything. So I will never do more than one reaction series at a time, I don't think, but I am open to more. People have asked about that. I am open to more. As I said at the beginning, I do want to try reacting to this season of Attack on Titan that's coming out. Even though I'm not blind, even though I'm a manga reader, I do think I have some insight to offer, so I'm going to try that out. If I record the first episode or two and I see that it's not working out, it doesn't offer much insight, it isn't very interesting, I'll scrap the idea, I won't do it, and I'll go on to something else, I'll brainstorm. But please feel free to share any series you might want me to check out, to react to, any of that. I'd be open to it. Of course, like I said, I can't choose everything. I'll only be able to choose very rare things, but any ideas are welcome, as long as you're okay with me potentially not choosing what you say. Hopefully that's understandable. Also, plenty have been asking about if I'm going to do a main channel video on Arcane, like a polished, edited video in the style of my analyses on my main channel. Yes, I've decided at this point I will. I'll be covering a concept that's very near and dear to my heart, and I hope I can do it justice. I think I've talked about it adequately in my discussions, but I do think there's merit to doing a polished 20-minute video or something like that about this topic. So I will be doing it. At least one, at the very least. So hopefully you can look forward to that. Maybe it will have released by the time this reaction comes out. I doubt it, though. Those videos take a long time to do. One more thing is, if you're interested, please feel free to follow me on Twitch. I'm going to start streaming very soon. By the time this video comes out, I hopefully will have already started streaming. So yeah, I'm making a bit of a transition over to Twitch. If you're interested in that, please give me a follow, and you can see me do some more casual content, which I'm having so much fun with. I'll be playing some games, doing analytical playthroughs of Final Fantasy games, maybe some blind stuff, some casual chatting, tier lists, all sorts of things. So if you're interested in that, please give my Twitch a follow. So Arcane. What do I have to say about this show? It was beautiful. It was brilliant. The aesthetics, the direction are consistently on point. I think highlights in terms of that would be episode 5, episode 7, episode 3, and episode 9 would be the highlights in terms of direction. But every single episode had beautiful aesthetics, beautiful visual storytelling. One of the best things about Arcane is the way it is so efficient with subtext, whether it be through character actions or body language or visual storytelling. It tells you so much with so little, and throughout this reaction series I've tried to dive into that. Hopefully I've gotten it across well enough, and I love that about it. The presentation is second to none. The character work is beautiful. Every character, you can see where they come from. They do so much with substantial but subtle and minimalistic backstories. One's for Medarda, Jayce, the beginning of episode 1 with Powder and Vi, with Vander, with Silco, his flashback, Viktor, Caitlyn. They do so much with little backstories at the beginnings of episodes. and they offer so much. They tell you exactly why the characters act the way they do, or they inform you very substantially about them. This entire cast is just so rich, so fully realized, so beautifully presented in writing and visuals, beautifully voice acted as well. Everyone is so human and believable within the context of this world. Everyone sheds a light on some aspect of the setting or some new emotion. Everyone brings something new to the table. I love this cast. It's brilliant. And it's only gone from strength to strength from a very strong start. And this cast is the reason why I'm going to be doing a tier list at the end of this discussion. From a more general perspective, the story just builds upon itself. It lays foundations and just builds upon them to stunning degree. The prologue arc of Act 1 was extremely good, ending with the manifestation of the end of so many mini character journeys and setting the stage for what's to come. It was a great foundational arc. Act 2 deepened and enriched the setting in depth and breadth and showed us where all these characters were at and so many new and interesting elements of this setting, and I love that. It's quite close to Act 3, but Act 3 takes the cake for me. Episodes 7 and 9 were my two favorite episodes of the whole series, so I can't not have Act 3 as my favorite. It's just, it offered so much. It offered a beautiful finale for this series, and one of the most stunning sequences I've seen in anything ever in Ekko vs. Jinx. I think the storytelling was firing on all cylinders throughout, but it took an extra step up in the way things manifested in Act 3, so it would be my favorite one. I think it just went from strength to strength, but Act 2 is quite close to it. But yeah, the plot, the stories, the trajectory of all the characters, how there's such a distinct identity in the storytelling and such a distinct plan for where these characters are going to go, with seeds planted so early on that manifest later on that you may only see in retrospect. I've noticed lots of things in editing that I didn't notice in the moment totally, that I've gone back and seen and that brought about plot elements later on. It's just such a great series. It's been a joy. In terms of ranking the episodes from start to finish, from top to bottom, I think my favorite was episode 9. Second favorite would be episode 7. And then from there, I think I'd go 6, 5, 3, 8, 4, 2, 1. With 1 still being a good episode. But that's just the standard that this show has set. Anyways, it's been an absolute ride. I've enjoyed this so much. Arcane was brilliant. If you're interested in scores, I would give this a strong 9 out of 10, like a 9.5 out of 10, and it's definitely climbed the ranks on my favorite fiction list. For anyone who doesn't know, I have a top 100 fiction list that I'm planning on sharing on Twitch one day. I'd be surprised if it isn't in at least the top half. Around there. I can see it being somewhere around 50 or something like that. And this is just the first season. This is just the first 9 episodes. There's a second season to come, so sky's the limit for this amazing series. Okay, so I did say I was going to make a tier list of the characters, and that's what I'm going to be doing. I plan for this to be quite quick. I don't plan to give much of an explanation for my placings, because I've talked so long about this. This is going to be such a pain in the ass to edit, but it's worth it. But yeah, I don't plan on explaining too much, except for maybe comparing character placements and why a character that I haven't talked about too much goes in one tier versus another, etc. Aside from that, this is going to be relatively quick, but here I am going to rank literally every character in the show, of note, at least. All this talking is going to be great practice for when I start streaming. So to start, in this D tier, I've sorted out all the characters that are basically non-entities in my mind. I don't think about any of these. They're not bad characters, but their roles are so minimal, they make a very small impact on the show, so they don't contribute to my enjoyment much at all. They're just not noteworthy, so I'm not going to rank them, I'm not going to really mention them. They're just grunts for Silco, or random people from the bar, the traders in episode 1, or this funny old guy from episode 5, or this person who Jayce, dips his toes into politics with. They just have very singular roles, and that's it. So I'm not going to rank them. D+ is for the characters who are very similar to that, but have a very defined role, or I enjoy them significantly more than these for some reason. I think this counselor, I don't know his name, but I think he's very funny because of his, he's a great representation of why Mel looks upon politics with a sort of like sly smile at this is also stupid, because she plays him like a flute, right? She uses him. She has him in her pocket from episode 1 because of that child's toy. So I think that's a great indirect way to characterize Mel in a way. So I appreciate him a bit more than these because of that role. Same thing here with Rennie's son for the role he had in Jayce's realization. I just appreciate him a bit more than these because of that. Same with Marcus's daughter, great emotional role even if she doesn't have too much characterization. And same with Rio, a great representation of the mutation must go on. A nice link between Viktor and Singed's, that's hard to say, Singed's relationship. Very symbolic. Definitely Rio is my favorite character out of these. But in general, anyone in D rank or D plus rank are not ranked. Okay, and then we go into rank C. I don't think there are bad characters in Arcane at all. I don't think there are any. I just think there are some that are less impressive than others or not used much. And so C is just characters that are fine. You know, they're fine. I don't think of them overly much, but they're fine. They're all right. They had their roles and they executed them. So I think this is where I'm going to start ranking them. So I think Benzo would go first. He doesn't have much of a role in the story, but I like his camaraderie with Vander. I like the hints to their past, his history with Silco, and he's very understanding of the way that these kids want to forge their own place in the world. I like Benzo. Deckard is a good representation of just someone that is tossed aside and used in this world. He's used as a test for Shimmer, essentially. He's not a good person. He's a thug. He's a villain. He's not likable in any sense of the word. But the manner in which he's used and tossed aside and all of that, it inspires not sympathy, but sadness at the state of the world for me. So he's a good representation of someone who's just used and tossed aside by this world and the people who would prey upon people like him. Jayce's mom, not much to say about her. Very understandable the way she treats Jayce in episode 2, where she says he's lost his mind just for his own well-being, so he isn't exiled from Piltover, just so he can live with them. Just a very understandable character. I liked her. She contributed. And sorry, I missed one. So Caitlyn's dad would go in D+, because he's more distinct and notable than these other ones, but I think that he is not too memorable, but I think you can see through his interactions and the way his demeanor and the way he talks with his wife and interacts with Caitlyn, that he is the sort of softer side of that parent dynamic. He is very understanding of Caitlyn, and he sort of tempers his wife's less savory habits or things like that a little bit. So I think he's would go in D+. We have Huck here. I wouldn't have thought twice about him, but his role in episode 6 really elevated him for me, made him notable, at least, a good representation of the downtrodden in the Undercity, the sort of people who, you know, just want to grasp power once in their life and are overtaken by Shimmer and mutated and addicted and all of that. His role is very sad and very effective in episode 6. Elora, I don't have much to say, but she's just generally likable, a good right-hand woman to Mel. I think she's astute in her own way, she's wise, she's experienced, she's a bit of a fox as well, and at the same time in her interactions with Mel, there's an understanding. She knows how Mel feels about her own family, and she understands that and is very tactful about that. She's just a good assistant. She's a good contributor to Mel as a person. She contributes to her scenes quite well. I think I'd then put Clagger, likable character, not much aside from that. I do find Milo to be a bit more interesting, which is why he's a tad below him. Then I would say Caitlyn's mom. Caitlyn's mom is interesting to me because she's very aristocratic. She's an illustration of high society and the negatives of that, and why people don't like it, why Caitlyn doesn't like it, why people despise it, and the sort of unsavory parts of it. She's very haughty and snobby in certain ways, and she does look down upon people in Piltover in a very discriminatory way. She uses confirmation bias, and she's not really open-minded, but at the end, she was open to collaboration with Piltover. She did vote. She was the last one to vote on Jayce's plan, but she did vote for it. And despite all the unsavory traits of hers, I would never call her to be a heinous or evil person. She's just molded and born and bred in this society, and this is the type of person that this can bring about, with all her bad traits and all her good traits. She and her husband do care for Caitlyn quite a lot, and that's illustrated very clearly, I think. But yeah, just all the different dimensions to her, I like that. I like that quite a bit, even if she's very minimalistic and not used overly much. Then I would say Finn. Finn's a good spearhead of the Undercity Council and the sort of uprising against Vander's ideals. I found his character design to be great, his voice is very interesting, and just his role, to show Sevika's loyalty and to show a representation of these people being unhappy with how Silco is spiraling a bit and how he's sort of going out of control and how people are onto him. You needed someone to do that. Finn was a great choice for that. He has a very distinct role, and I think he executes it really well. He was memorable despite being a sniveling worm who failed. But yeah, definitely contributory. And lastly, Milo. Just like Claggor, they have very limited roles and they were only meant to be there for a short amount of time. But I found his insecurities and the way he pestered kind of Powder and nagged her and criticized her during his time in Vi's company to add an interesting layer to him. There's a bit of an inferiority complex there as he's trying to seemingly impress Vi throughout the first act. And so he's snuffed out before he can really achieve anything he wants to in life. And he's really well voice acted by, I think, Yuri Lowenthal, I'm pretty sure. And just a well-presented side character. And the way he's used, particularly post-time skip, in Jinx's mentality, her psychology, the way he whispers to her. He's used as this suffering soul in that scene in episode 6 when she holds up the lighter, the flare. I love how he's used there. I like him a bit more than Claggor, and I think he's the best of this bunch in C. And I would say that this is more or less in order. Oh, sorry, and then Skye. Skye would be in C as well. I think she would go here. She inspires a lot of thoughts for the reasons I've sort of talked about in episode 8 and here. I think I talked about her mostly in this episode 9 discussion. But yeah, basically all of that, I think she slot in right about there. So this is all in order. Benzo, Deckard, Jayce's mom, Huck, Alora, Skye, Claggor, Caitlyn's mom, Finn, and Milo. All in C, all functional characters with a role and who contribute in one way or another. So we're down to my top 15 characters, so if you want to start from here, this is my top 15, listed from 15 up to 1. So I think 15 would be Singed. He offers a lot of great insight, but a lot of him is still shrouded in mystery. Don't get me wrong, I love that about him. It offers lots of hooks for future seasons and potential for that, as the dark side of discovery and innovation, and the interplay he has with Heimerdinger, the subtext there, what he did with Viktor, how he helped Silco. Lots of great material there, lots of things to sort of grasp onto. I'm just waiting for a bit more, which is why he is a bit lower. But I do think his characterization is really interesting. The hint at a backstory is great. What he represents symbolically is great. And he could easily climb up the ranks. That locket, that scene with him and his locket, that hinted at quite a bit. Next, I think, would be Mrs. Medarda, Mel's mom. She offers so much. She has changed the landscape of it in terms of broadening things for Noxus and showing the dynamics and politics of that side of the world without physically showing us Noxus. She's given me a ton of ideas about the interfamily dynamics, the politics there, how things are run there, and why she is the way she is. I think there's layers to her, as I described in this episode's discussion, and I think because of that, she's definitely a very good character. Just introduced in episode 8, only shown in 2 episodes, but there's so much substance there. Next, I think I'll put Grayson as my number 13. She was good and functional prior to episode 5, where we get that flashback with her and Caitlyn. She probably would have been in C, somewhere around here. I like her dynamics with Vander. I like what she did. I like how she interacted with Marcus and tried to sort of guide him in certain ways. I liked how she offered us an insight into how things worked, being that sort of double agent or that insider. But the focus on her in episode 5 really elevated her, I thought. And again, through just this minimalistic thing and how Marcus looks at her and the dynamics with her and Caitlyn and all of that, I think that elevated her quite a lot. That made me think of her in a different way, and that subtext, all the things I described in my episode 5 discussion, is why she's, I think, very substantial. You can grasp quite a lot of things the more you dive into Grayson and think about her. And so yeah, she'd be my number 13. Number 12 would be Sevika. I had a whole section about her in this video, so I won't talk about her characterization here, but yeah, she just snuck up on me at the end as me kind of going like, yeah, she's a very solid character. There's a lot of potential for her, and even still, just as her role right now, she has done a lot, and she's shown us a lot, and she's offered good insight into the type of almost like an everyman perspective. Like, what would you do in this sort of perspective while being fiercely loyal at the same time and having her own sense of identity and that sort of thing? Sevika's very solid. And so, yeah, this is ranked. Everyone in B is someone who I would consider to be a very solid character, a very good character who excels in their role and contributes a pretty significant amount. Now we're going to A tier, where I think every character here is definitely very good, contributes a ton to my enjoyment, and who I've probably dedicated a long section to at least once. We are now in the top 11, so number 11 would be Marcus. I talked a lot about him in my episode 6 discussion and episode 7 discussion and prior to that, excuse me. He's a character who does some bad things, who is not very likable, but at the same time he's very understandable and sympathetic the entire way through. You see why he did the things he did, you see why his back was against the wall, and you see why he ends up being this sort of person. The way he viewed his life with regret, the way he left his daughter, the way he was essentially used by Silco in this new regime, in this new order for enforcers, and this heightening anxiety that crept up on him all the way until the end. It just makes him a very effective, tragic character, I think, while not being a good person and not being a helpless victim, of course. Marcus is great. And now we're going into my top 10. These are the 10. What order will they be in? So this is actually a bit of a tough decision for between number 9 and number 10, but I think I'm going to put Caitlyn at 10. I like Caitlyn a lot. She's a very good character. I like her dynamics with Vi. I like what she added as a different perspective from someone who was born and bred in Piltover, and the way she views these sorts of things and, cuts through all the bullshit and her idea of justice and how she's able to carry it out as opposed to Marcus. I like all of that. She's really good. I think the reason why she's a bit lower is just because I find a lot of characters ahead of her, particularly my number 9, to be a bit more just interesting conceptually. It inspires a bit more imagination. But I love Caitlyn. I love how empathetic she is, how open she is. Her role has been irreplaceable. She's been a very valuable role throughout this show. And number 9 would be Heimerdinger. The thing that puts him ahead of Caitlyn, I think, would be his dynamic with Jayce is so complex and rich and nuanced. You can see where he comes from. You can see that he isn't all caution. He isn't dictatorial. He has a scientist's mind, and he acts in these ways and does these things because he just wants the best for society. But also he has flaws. He is not totally perfect despite living for 300 years. And his approach has flaws and Jayce's approach has flaws, and seeing them sort of ideologically battle throughout the whole thing was a treat, an absolute treat. I'd like to see more from him. I'd like to see where he goes because I think he could rise up the ranks as well. But as it stands, he's my number 9. The whole thing with Jayce, the whole thing with how he represents tradition and caution, while also understanding the flip side of that and the draw of that, he's such an effective character, and Arcane wouldn't be the same without him. Now we're going to S tier. Characters in S tier are what I would consider to be absolutely awesome. These are awesome characters too, but these ones take it a step further. They contribute on an even more significant scale. And the first, this is actually a tough one. I think it would be Ekko. I think number 8 is Ekko. I was really sort of trying to figure out who would be number 8 and who would be number 7, but I think Ekko's number 8. Ekko would have been like around here, pre-time skip. Episode 7 completely elevates him so much as a character. It offers so much subtext. I talked about him for what seems like hours in my discussion for episode 7 because there's so much you can grasp from the way he acts, from little things, and the way the Firelights are functioning, the way he formed this third party, this anarchist group, what that says about him as a person, him as a leader, what that says about the state of society in Zaun, and just his conviction, yet he still has this heart and sentiment that he can't let go of, but steals that off to become this great leader. There's so many layers to him, conflicting sides, how he feels about Jinx, and all of that. Ekko's just wonderful, and I can't have a character who's a part of that brilliant scene in episode 7 not be S tier at the very least. Ekko's awesome, and I hope he progresses past this point. Again, he's another one who could rise in the ranks. But very slightly ahead of him is Vander. Vander is that great prologue character, the character who needed to die for things to stimulate and for the plot to sort of get going in earnest. And his final stand and the things he did in episode 3 are just so powerful, so additive to the story. He affects multiple lives. His spirit lives on through Vi, though not in totality, as I mentioned. But the lessons he's said throughout the series echo through Ekko through Ekko and the firelights and all of that, Ekko through Caitlyn and her approach, Ekko through Silco and his parallels with Vander, Ekko through Vi and his spirit and how he reminds Vi of times gone by. He dies in episode 3, but his presence is felt throughout the story, and we keep coming back to him. So he's a constant contributor to the story. I hope he is in the future episodes as well. You don't have to show flashbacks about him, but I hope there continue to be character parallels that, coincide and dovetail with his ideologies. And number 6 would be Mel. Mel Medarda, what a great character. I love how she kept me guessing, and then I love the switch up in episode 6 while being surprising, it being totally natural within the context of her character and the way the story is structured and the points of views we see. I love the dualism between her heart and her duty and her love for her family, and I love the conviction in her as she chooses to do the right thing by the end. I think she's a wonderful character that just goes from strength to strength, who's great and keeps you guessing from episode 2, and that just continues, and the momentum is just continuing all the way until episode 9. Mel is awesome. And now we're down to our top 5. The 5 big ones. These 5 just contribute to my enjoyment to this story on another level. These 5 are who I consider to be the main characters of Arcane Season 1. These other ones, Vander, Mel, Caitlyn, Heimerdinger, Vander, I said Vander already, Ekko, they're all main players as well to differing extents. Vander and Heimerdinger to a lesser extent. Ekko is only really present once Act 3 starts, and after that he's used pretty minimalistically. But Mel and Caitlyn for sure are main characters too. However, these 5 are just special. They contribute on another level. They're who I would consider to be the main characters of Season 1 of Arcane. And so first in SS would be Vi. We're with her at the beginning. She is probably the main character of Act 1 more so than anyone else, maybe aside from Jayce, Vander, and Powder. I think Act 1, Vi is the main character, and she continues to be there in prominence until the end. I think the way that the prison sentence and her grief and the events of episode 3 has had an effect on her is very emotional and understandable, and yet I love that she still has this sense of heart, how she's followed Vander's advice of not losing that sense of heart. But there's so much regret attached to her, and that's so powerful with the way she regrets having left Powder behind and how it's resulted in Jinx and all of that. And the way that she can't really stifle her rage at this point is very, very saddening. And the way she parallels Vander at this point, it inspires a lot of sympathy and thought and sadness and reflection. Vi is amazing. Vi is one of my favorite characters in this story. And the difference between 3 and 4 is very tough, but I think I've got to put Jinx as number 4. This might be unpopular to have her as my 4th favorite. That might be a bit low for some people. This isn't a knock on her character. I don't think there's anything wrong with her character at all. I find her extremely sympathetic. I think if you've been following my discussions, you know how I feel about her. You know I love her as a character. I just think she's amazing. I think the time skip elevated her a ton, and she is advertised as the main character for Arcane for a reason. She's a phenomenal character. I think her mentality is so interesting. There's so many layers to this. There's so many, you can just think about her for forever. You can find little Easter eggs and tidbits in her psychology and fragmented mind through the episodes forever. You could just talk about her forever. She's amazing. I think her scattered psychology makes her more interesting than Vi, and her role as this pseudo-villain, while being totally sympathetic. And I think the reason why she's not higher than this is just because the character struck me a bit more emotionally for differing reasons, totally subjective reasons, the 3 above her. But she has great promise. After making this decision to beat Jinx, that elevated her a ton, and she has great promise for Season 2. I can't wait to see where she goes. Number 3 would be Viktor. To be honest, the line he says to Jayce, "In the pursuit of great, we forgot to do good," that alone, how he says that, I think puts him above Jinx at this point in time for me. It's just, there's so much emotion and sentiment and meaning in that quote. And I love how he and Jayce parallel and contrast each other, how he inspires so much sympathy. He's probably the most sympathetic character in the story, him and Jinx, I would say. what he does for the theme of arcane knowledge and what that means for all these characters and all of that. He's a great representation of that wonder. Ever since a kid, he was obsessed with that, and his journey throughout, his grappling and the conviction he has with ultimately saying, "I will die if it means doing the right thing." That was just absolutely wonderful. He's a phenomenal character, but he's not quite in my favorite two. These two are just a little bit above, just a little bit elevated from those three. And if I think I had to pick one to be second, it would be Silco. I just talked about him a great deal. I have nothing really to add. He's a phenomenal antagonist, one of my favorite antagonists in fiction. I just love everything he brings to the table. I love his presence. I love his characterization, his backstory, how he just keeps you guessing about his relationship with Jinx, how he ultimately is undone by his love for her. What a character. And right next to him, I would never say that he's significantly better than him as a character, but he just inspired the most thought and emotion from me, is Jayce. Jayce is my favorite character in Arcane Season 1. I've talked about him for hours at this point. You know how I feel about him, and this is just my gut feeling. This just feels right. This is my ranking. Jayce just does something for me, inspires more thought, and hits that spot inside of me for what I look for in a character, just on a level a bit different than anyone else. And he's my favorite. His journey is everything I look for in fictional characters. The complexity, the human nuances, the admiration, and while being likable in certain ways at the same time, the deep flaws, how he opens up things about the setting, how he grows, how he regresses, how human he is. And in the end, how admirable it was for him to make those choices. And as well, I can't say that his haunting smile to Medarda did not have an effect on this character ranking. That is so sad to me, so tragic to me, and it's one of the lasting things that this series has left with me, if not the lasting scene, that smile right before disaster. Jayce is my favorite character in the series. I don't expect that to be a popular opinion, but that's my opinion, and hopefully you see where I'm coming from, given how I've discussed all of these characters. So yeah, this is my top. These are my Arcane characters ranked. D tiers are not ranked, but C and up is. This is my top 15. Singed, Mrs. Medarda, Grayson, Sevika, Marcus, Caitlyn, Heimerdinger, Ekko, Vander, Mel, Vi, Jinx, Viktor, Silco, and Jayce. Anyways, thank you for sticking with me for this long. Thank you for watching this hugely long-ass video. This is inconceivably long, so sorry about that, but I really wanted to make it count. Again, if you're interested in further reactions, if you're interested in Attack on Titan reactions or other shows, stay tuned. There will be more, and there will be Patreon perks for it as well, of course, for Attack on Titan, for any other potential things I do down the line. Thank you again so much for your support. Thank you for staying with me for my journey. Thank you for taking an interest in my experience with this show. And yeah, follow me on Twitch again if you'd like to see content similar to this, but applied to other general discussions. I might talk about Arcane. I will talk about Final Fantasy games. I'll do analytical playthroughs, blind playthroughs, all that sort of thing. Again, thank you very much. Many thanks for watching. And it's been real. This has been a joy and a pleasure. And I can't say thank you enough.